All right. Hey, all of you freedom-loving boys and girls, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. As always, if you're watching or listening to this podcast, we say it every time, but if you're looking at recent events now more than ever, you are part of the resistance. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Mark. The other host, I always mess it up. I got it right this time, right there.
Yep. Oh yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah, I just got to point opposite what I think I'm pointing at. Redbeard. And as you can see, we've got some very special guests. All of these gentlemen have been on the podcast in the past. We'll go around and round robin and do intros, and they can tell you a little bit about themselves. But before we do that, just jumping into what we normally do. So it's episode 29. Today is the 12th of October. This video will be posted tomorrow, the 13th, Friday the 13th at 1400 Central Daylight Time. But just to let you know, this is going to be Guns and Things Part 2. And this will probably have a little bit more emphasis on things, but guns will be the segue as we kind of come into the podcast tonight. Before we jump into it, and before everybody gives their intros, and before we start talking and kind of going into the heart of the matter, I just want to preface it with this. Everybody you see here, we're just guys, just like anyone else. Not a single one of us professes to be like, oh, I'm a master Jedi of whatever. But each and every one of us has a lot of strengths in different areas, different experiences, different backgrounds, different perspectives. And then for some of us, there are some, like I can't Cerakote, and that's Blake's, let him tell his thing, like I'm not a gunsmith, that's these guys. And prior to hitting record, when we were doing our pregame, something that came up is, I've got this experience behind me, right? But guess what? That's all with military style weapons, whether that's, domestic, US or allied or threat weapons. Jeremy and Blake start geeking out and talking about blackout or 300 Win Mags and shit. Now, I don't know the ballistic coefficient of all that kind of crap. So again, we're not trying to be, experts. We all just bring a little bit something different to the table. Well, the one thing we all have in common is we're all stupid enough to be here and we're all knuckleheads. So, and most of us are bald. That's the other one, I guess, Yeah. Okay. Well, 3 out of 5 ain't bad. No. All right. On that note, Redbeard, have I forgotten anything from like the intro? Because otherwise, let's go into introductions.
No, I think we can jump right into introductions. But I do think that when Blake does go, we should give him a big shout out to the job that he did for you as well.
Well, then let's finish with Blake then. All right, Let's go straight down in Hollywood Squares. We'll go to Paul. Paul, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, sir.
So I'm a like-minded individual, and I have spent the last 30 years in information technology and security. And, I offer that side of things.
And you've got a really nice bald head and beard.
Yeah, he is a very well-kept person, I have to say.
Yeah, in multiple manners, multiple ways. All right, so now, I see I got to move my hand. So over, God damn it.
There you go.
Over there, but down below, we'll go over to our friend Patrick, who's been on before. Patrick, tell everybody a little bit about yourself. And by the way, you are on mute. Thank you for being polite, sir.
Yep, there we go. So, hey, thanks again for having me. Name's Patrick. Let's see. I'm still a 19-year-old knucklehead Lance Corporal Marine, but picked up some other skills along the way. So I worked in law enforcement, worked in the intel community, worked, narcotics, SWAT, ground combat stuff, infantry. Let's see. I already said that, and intelligence. So mostly a wild mix of all that stuff. So my exposure from, to firearms and weaponry and mindset, that type of stuff, all largely comes from the government. So, but one thing I think that what Mark said makes complete sense. We're regular people. So if we learned it, anybody else out there can learn it too. So hopefully we can, impart some type of knowledge to somebody that is useful today. So
well said.
Yeah. And, and that's a great intro. So I joined the military when I was 17. I literally turned 17 and 10 days later, I was in Fort Benning, Georgia. I was Harmony Church. I know, don't throw me under the bus, but, or no, I'm sorry. I was San Hilton. Yeah. I'm sorry. I got that backwards. It's been a long time, but yeah, no, I don't even know if they even have Harmony Church in San Hill anymore, but yeah. So like Patrick, same with me. My background, it's almost all government. Like, yeah, as a kid growing up, 410s, 12 gauge. I had a hexagon barrel 20 pump action 22. I think it was like 18 rounds tube fed. And then my only other like deer hunting gun was a 30-30. So I'm not going to be the person who's going to sit and talk about ballistic coefficients. That'll be these other, knuckle. Oh, see, I always screw there that way.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. But so on that note, and I'm glad you just said that, Patrick, we're all here. We can all learn. I can still learn. There's tons of things that I can still learn. And, I've been carrying weapons around for 30 plus years. So, yeah, whatever. But they were the government military style weapons. Mm-hmm. That's not what, an actual belt fed or a Mark 19 or, 81 millimeter mortars. Most people don't have that shit, so. All right.
Should.
Well, okay. Well, maybe we'll bring that up in conversation. All right, let's go over to Blake. Well, okay, hang on. I can't let you cheers and not cheers you back. Yes,
there you go, buddy.
Had belt feds. I agree.
Oh, there we go.
Belt
cheers to belt feds and mortars.
All right. And here, I'm just going to take my sip because we'll go over to Blake for intro. But on the note you just said, you hear these idiots make these arguments like, well, the founding fathers didn't have this. Like the hell they didn't. They had cannons. They had warships.
Dude, they had hand mortars.
They had the state of the art material back then. I mean, like, what are you talking about?
And they did have repeating arms back then too.
And thank you for bringing that up. That is, they did. All right. On that, let's come over to, are we just going to call you Blake or are we going to give you a bearded name? Well, honestly, of all of us, he would be like Gandalf, but let's come over to Blake. All right, sir, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Blake. I've been a lifelong outdoorsman, raised in a family of lifelong outdoorsmen, an avid hunter, and I ended up making that a career, actually, as of the last 15 years of my life, as a professional gunsmith full-time. One of the things I do want to touch on real quick, too, Mark, you kind of said this at the beginning, and that's one of the things I do love about these kind of roundtable sort of things is a lot of different people have a lot of different experiences that you don't have. And when we can all sit together and talk about things and look at, the proverbial elephant and see the different parts of it to try to figure out what it is, we can all kind of come to a better understanding of things. And I think with this world, the way it is right now, having these kinds of conversations, whether they're digitally for other people to see or just around your own kitchen table at home, I think they're imperative to a community that's ready for what may or may not come in the future. So.
Dude,
you just nailed it right there, sir. High five on that. Boom.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw one last little plug out because we were just kind of having a little bit of fun. But, when Blake says he's an avid hunter, I'm an avid hunter, but I'm not nowhere near the level of hunting that Blake and his dad and other people that he knows. Like my idea of being an avid hunter is like, I hunt, I'm a bow hunter, I hunt deer, I hunt small game, and I fish. Blake has done some, so if we're going to talk about different types of platforms for different types of animals and different types of ranges and different types of environmental considerations, I can sit and talk about, a thumper versus a AGS 17 or a Mark 19, or, I can sit and talk, plunging fire from a 240 Bravo or an M2. I can sit and talk about that, but I can't talk about half the other shit that Blake knows about just from his real world experiences in the hunting realm. So, yeah. So I just had to throw that out there. You always leave stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, then on that note, that's it. Here's your round table of knuckleheads, and we're going to sit and talk about guns and things. So, the one thing we didn't discuss, Redbeard, is here. Do you want to throw a little? No, this is appropriate. Throw a little bit out about yourself, your experience in the. Again, if we're going to talk about guns and things, I mean, people can go back. We've talked about this before, but why don't you just go ahead and do it again?
Yeah. So, I don't know. Like I'm just a big dude when it comes to firearms. I grew up hunting, fishing, always was a more rural living person. And then my fascination for firearms kind of grew. As time went on, I started getting into more platforms and stuff like that. And eventually I went to school for gunsmithing. And right now, I just do some stuff on my own, but eventually I'm looking to open my own business, preferably when I move out to Wyoming here shortly. And I think that's going to be a really it's going to be something that I'll be happy to do because it's something I have an interest to do. And there's a lot of things that, you know, you learn in school, and I'm sure Blake can even talk about this. There's a lot of stuff that you can learn from other people, but at the same time, there's so much more that you'll learn actually doing something. Because you'll see people that'll come in and they'll come in with like just different platforms. So that's what really intrigues me. Beyond that, I'm a bushcrafter. I love being out in nature. I'm a big fitness guy. Always been big into training and stuff like that as it pertains to firearms, whether it's with gear, without gear, whatever. I believe it's important to hone different aspects of skill sets. And so I have a background in labor, so I kind of know how to use a measuring tape every once in a while and swing a hammer. But beyond that, like, I'm just a super simple dude, big family guy, big God guy. So that's basically it. Oh, you're muted, Mark.
Thank you. I was trying to be polite. I got a little bit of a, not a cold, but, you know, so keep me on point, because I might overlook that, because again, I'm looking at 7 different things here trying to keep this moving. But hey, so maybe we'll just use one of the things that you just said as a way to just segue right into it. So again, for everybody watching or listening, you know, we kind of have a general framework of what we want to talk about. So we already did guns part 1. This is guns and things part 2. And this is going to be a little bit more heavy on the things aspect of it. And I think that'll be a little bit more clear or evident here in a few minutes. But fellas, why don't we just start off with a little guns and things? Because so Jeremy and I actually were able to, you know, carve out some time and go out and do what, if you are, whether it's a handgun, whether it's a long gun, whether it's a home defense weapon, whatever your thing is, you have to go out and practice. And, you know, you've got to go out and confirm zeros, reconfirm zeros, you know, zero your weapon, especially if you're putting some new optic on it or new iron sights, whatever the case is. So Jeremy and I were able to go out and do that yesterday. We'll probably actually post a video, probably Tuesday of next week, of a little conversation Jeremy and I had about shotguns while we were out there. And we'll post that up. And that is the intent here, as you know, Blake and everybody's kind of said it. We all come from different perspectives, different backgrounds, and we're just here to use this roundtable type of format to share experiences. It might work for you, it might not. I mean, like, you know, look, Jeremy and I have talked about some things when it comes to wheel guns, and like, and when I was teaching, you know, look, if you cannot manipulate the slide on a semi-auto handgun, well, then, you know, maybe a wheel gun or a revolver is what's right for you, or maybe a shotgun. Because, and I'm going to throw this out there because I know this is definitely something Patrick's, you know, really a student of, is what is, they're just tools in the toolkit, you know, and what's your environment? What is your task? What is your purpose? What is it that you're trying to accomplish here? And, you know, again, sometimes a shotgun will be a better weapon. Maybe a revolver will be a better weapon, or a semi-auto, or maybe an AR platform. If you want to just keep calling everything like that an AR platform, seems to be the trend today, but they're just tools in a toolkit. And then there's so many other variables. Well, if you only have the money or the resources, you can only get one of these things. Well, I think what we would all try to, and this is where I just want to kind of start, and everybody can chime in here. You got to come at that from a very honest, realistic, no bullshit, no ego perspective. If you can't rack the slide on a semi-auto, then why are you carrying a semi-auto? If you're afraid of shooting a 45 or a 40, then why are you carrying a 45 or a 40? You know, honestly, and if home defense is all you're concerned about, and you can, on a 22, whether it's a, you know, semi, and if you can press that trigger and you can put 10 rounds in the size of a, you know, a quarter or a $50 in the span of 5 seconds, well, I mean, if all those are in the head, I mean, like, you know, dead is dead. So, fellas, see where I'm kind of going? I think the first thing is, these are just tools in the toolkit. Maybe we start warming up right there. Who wants to chime in? Patrick, I see you kind of chomping at the bit a little bit.
Yeah, I'll guess I'll go kick it off. In terms of what you just said, as far as like application, no matter what you have, right? So, hey, you know, the term gun porn. I like looking at cool pictures of guns and optics, and you know, speaking of Cerakote, like, hey, I've thought about doing all kinds of different cool things with my firearms, but You know, what it boils down to is I've got basically two firearms. I've got a pistol that I'm really comfortable with, and I've got a rifle that I'm really comfortable with. I've tried my best to master those to the best of my ability, but I also understand the capabilities and limitations of those things. So that's something that I think a lot of folks lose sight of. Or, you know, the other thing too is like tool in the toolbox. If you're a firearms collector, that's very different than somebody who's training like for true defense. So, you know, if you're not a capable gunfighter, you know, what are you trying to do with this, right? So I think we're probably going to talk a little bit about, you know, the ballistics folks and that type of thing. I'm not that guy. I can't speak intelligently to that stuff. So everything to me boils down to application. What kind of firearm? Heck, what kind of knife are you carrying? What kind of, the EDC? What are you carrying? Why do you carry it? Is it just taking up space because it makes you feel good? But that's kind of, my approach to things, and everything stems from your thought process, your awareness, and then your physical capability to utilize whatever that tool is in certain conditions. So going to the range and that type of stuff, you absolutely have to zero. You have to do the maintenance and on yourself, but then you have to expand beyond that to develop your capabilities in a real world setting. So I don't know how people train, open up to everybody else, but I know Mark, where you and I used to work, going to the range wasn't just going to the range. You might have a few minutes of warming up, but then it's kind of a smoke session. When I say smoke session, I'm not talking about the firearm smoke. I'm talking about a physical event, like where you're literally, panting, you're dragging your teammates, you're, dragging them, you're carrying people, you're carrying things, you're sprinting behind cover, you're up, you're down. It's just, So that to me is the ultimate thing where somebody can aspire to, but they have to know what right looks like and why they're doing it.
Right.
Yeah. And just real quickly, just to Patrick's point, again, what is the task that this tool is designed for, or what is the task that I need to accomplish? And to Patrick's point, so again, neither Patrick or I, we're probably way stupider than these other guys when it comes to the ballistic side of it, because we were just like, hey, no, you're going to be under duress. You've got to be able to you respond this way, shoot this quickly, snap, shoot under these type of conditions, these type of environmental conditions and physical conditions and X, Y, and Z, right? Because that was more of our nature, and that might not be what other people need to be preparing for. Yeah. It may not be realistic given your, your financial considerations, your environmental. Maybe there's no training range around that actually does that, or offers that training. So, yeah, and that's why, Patrick, you're always a good guy to just bring that back down to earth and just realize, again, these are just tools in the toolbox, but there's a whole hell of a lot more of it that you have to consider. Yeah. On that note, Redbeard, you were about to say something, and then I'm going to bring it to Blake.
No, and I was just going to kind of add quickly to what Patrick was saying, which, I think you're starting to see this proliferate with, groups and stuff like that across the United States, that you do have a lot of guys that get together and they're concerned and they take their training very seriously. And I think the difference between some of those groups versus like some guys who, they'll look at stuff and they're like, oh, that looks really cool. Like, I need to buy that because for some reason that translates whatever skill set there is to them by way of acquiring some gear. One of the best things I ever heard is, intentional training. Like, that's one of my favorite phrases, is intentional training. Like, but in saying that, you have to also understand, again, like, what is your perceived operating environment? What are some potential variables? How are you going to adapt what it is that you're going to be running for a system? And also, in addition to that, like gear, if you're going to have any gear or whatever, there's a lot of things to consider with that. And I think one of the areas, and Mark, I've talked to you about this before, but you'll see some people that will look at a picture of like a Delta operator, from Army's Delta. And it's a picture of like just a kitted out, like, rifle, and it looks high speed and they got all this stuff. And somebody's like, I really want that. Which is great, but I feel like a lot of people want to set up like that because they feel like it's going to be provide some type of advantage.
Plus,
when in reality, What's that?
+1 to badass.
Right. No, and you're not wrong. And it's like, dude, like, or you can set up your rifle or your sidearm or whatever tool it is or firearm it is that you're going to employ, and you can set that up to get the most out of what you can do. So that way you have a good cohesion between the platform that you choose and your abilities, and be able to cultivate one really good system, as opposed to trying to get something that's specifically designed for a specific person for a specific mission set. I'm more along the lines of, if people are going to take like the Minuteman thing very seriously, having more of a general purpose rifle, which is not only good for self-defense and being utilized as a fighting rifle, but you can also get game with that rifle. You can do a lot of things with that rifle. And I think that's more advantageous today than having a rifle that's relegated to a special parameter or specific thing. So,
well, and that's kind of one of the things, you know, like Pat and Mark, you guys were talking about the tools, the toolbox and everything. And, you know, Redbeard, like you're just kind of talking about having that thing for the hunting game, and, you know, the Swiss Army knife, if you will. You know, to me, it's kind of, you should have 5 guns. You should have a pistol that you're proficient with. You should have that quote unquote AR style or whatever you would use in a more of a two-way range sort of situation, but can also be used for small game. You should have a shotgun. You should have a bolt gun. And so really it's about 4, you know, if you have those 4 guns, you can pretty much do anything you really need to with them. So
I would concur with that. You're muted, Mark.
Thank you. That's gonna trip me up all night here tonight. I might just leave myself, if I'll maybe just cough off camera, because anyway, but the only thing I would say to that, and it kind of goes to what Patrick and I were talking about, which is, well, what is your mission? What is your objective? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Again, you know, and you got 4. So in the perfect world, I agree with what Blake just said all day long. And I know he didn't mean it this way, but if you've got a bug out or bug in or whatever it is that you're doing, you know, Blake's comment gives you the 4 main tools or the 4 main food groups that you need, and you know, across a wide spectrum of environmental or operational considerations. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to carry all those in the different ammo and stuff.
No, that's for, I'm at my house. I'm protecting my family. I'm feeding my family. I haven't had to quote unquote bug out. And that's kind of one of the big things about what we're talking about is, you know, you got to almost drill it down to a certain level 100%. To discuss if we want to talk about kit. But if you want to talk about, you know, just equipment and whatnot, as far as a universal, I mean, really, you know, Jeremy, you hit it on the head. It's a bolt gun. I mean, you can do everything with it. And as far as the soul of America, if you will, in essence, it was that Minuteman. It was that sharpshooter in the tree. It was someone that could pick off that single target because he's been busting the spine of a squirrel to feed his family for the last 6 years, 7 years straight. You know, and that's that American hybrid between the civilian requirement for feeding one's family and the militaristic requirement for defending one's lands. And it's that hybrid. It goes back into the concept of the last conversation we had about a truly free citizen is one that is extremely dangerous, but chooses to keep that danger sheathed until a time of need, in essence.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of putting that. And, you know, and it's, again, what I think whatever the chosen platform is for somebody like you, we can all agree that, look, unless you're getting out there and putting in the effort to become proficient with your chosen platform, it's really just going to be kind of like a net negative, because you just have something that weighs a lot that you're not very good at using, and so it's one less thing you would have to bring with you. So it's like, look, you don't magically translate into a really proficient person by way of having something, and that includes, and Blake can attest to this, maintenance. Like if you don't even know how to maintenance,
don't take us too far afield. I'm going to come over to Paul, but I just got to bring up a point of contention. I think you're wrong. I watched a YouTube video, Jeremy. I'm 100% proficient because I watched a YouTube video.
I apologize. Yeah, I forgot. It's just complete translation of skills.
We'll overlook that for this time and this time only. All right, Paul, you kind of see where we're going. I mean, it all kind of started tools in the toolbox, and let's bring it over to you. And then what do you think there, sir? What are your comments?
So I would say that, you know, I come from a family that hasn't had military experience since Vietnam. Okay. We don't have a lot of hunters in the family. So we do get formal training, but one of the things that I prefer to do when I'm helping fellow family members is, yeah, we go to the range, but slip the headgear off, slip the earring protection off, because you need to know what it's going to be like, the sound that it's going to be. Wearing that hearing protection inside the shooting range or outside. I tell them to do both. Now, obviously, protect your hearing. I'm not trying to encourage somebody to hurt themselves, but you don't want to be shocked, because it's a big difference depending on what you're shooting. So those are the type of things that, that I offer to, the people in my circle that, we don't have a lot of hunting and military experience. Just, use some logic and, just make sure that you could be in that situation in your house with no hearing protection. You're not going to have time. Why would you do it anyway? But, that's another story. You need to know what it's going to sound like. And when you get formal training, they make you wear the hearing protection. So,
So I just got to throw that out there, but because, Paul brings up a great point, and, depending on your background, whoever you are watching or listening, maybe you are, every time you're rolling out the gate, right? Every time you roll out the wire, that's a combat patrol. And chances are, unless you were like, basic infantry, and even at that point, half of those guys are wearing, their version of Peltors. I can't remember what the single pieces, Marines use those, but a lot of recon guys did too. But like, for me, I was always rolling out with Peltors, right? Because you were plugged in, because I had SATCOM. I had like 3 radios on me at all times, so it's very different. And Peltors are noise canceling, but I kind of want to come over to Patrick because I'm laughing about this, but yeah, but that's not reality, right? Unless that is your reality. And even then, that's not always your reality. You don't always have that capability, and batteries die and all kinds of shit happens. Yeah, you have to acclimate yourself. Well, here, a little side story. I don't know if I want to say this. I'm going to bring it over to Patrick, and I'm going to private message Redbeard, because I don't want to talk about stuff without his permission first. So, but to your point, Paul, you're absolutely right. These things aren't what everybody thinks. Most people are just going to the range, and the flat range, and they're practicing, and they've got, eyes and ears on. That's not the reality. Even just without your eyes on, and you've been shooting a bunch of rounds, dude, it doesn't matter if it's your long gun or your handgun. You're not going to get, I don't mean spalling, but you're going to inevitably get gas, little bits of debris, little bits of oil that's going to be kicking up into your face, depending on where that platform is, especially on long guns. And if you've not really experienced that before, like, it will freak you out the first time it happens. You're like, what is my weapon malfunctioning? It's like, no, this is called reality, dude. This is what it's really like. And it really is that loud when it's shot inside of a vehicle. Yes, that's what that sounds like, or a hallway. Patrick, let's come to you as I try to reach out to Redbeard on a quick comment here.
Okay, yeah, just on the topic of just kind of, I guess, keeping it real, right? So you're doing training at a flat range. You can try to maximize and do as much as you possibly can, adding movement and that type of stuff. Once you've taken care of your basic, marksmanship training, that type of stuff. But I liked what Redbeard said about the intentional training. Well, that's the only thing that I know. Like going to a range just to pop off rounds for the sake of popping off rounds, that's not serving any purpose. It's actually wasting an opportunity. So there's always a method, and it's usually warming up, finding some type of diagnostic drill where you can self-diagnose and figure out, hey, what do I need to work on today, or how am I going to tighten things up, and then slowly start adding movement into it, realistic. In terms of like ear protection, eye protection, ear protection, it's like, okay, hey, that's something that, like, I'd liken that to, going to, martial arts training or boxing or something like that. Well, if I'm hitting over and over and over, I want to protect myself, but just for the sheer number of, punches and strikes and that type of stuff, I'm going to, impact pads or a training partner or whatever. But if something actually breaks out where I'm going to actually use that, I'm not going to imagine those aren't going to appear, right? So it's the same thing with the ear pro, especially. Maybe you got eye pro, I'm not sure, but that's something that I'd say, hey, every now and then, we've all been caught with our ear pro off at the range, and it's like, okay, here's a quick reminder, but hey, guess what? It's a reminder to put it back on and protect, but at the same time, it's also a little bit of stress inoculation so that you're understanding, hey, this is what it kind of feels like, right? And then that piece on shooting inside of a vehicle, that pressure from that firearm is going to go somewhere. And if it's in an encapsulated space, like, in your car or truck or what have you, you're going to feel it. So if you're ever doing any type of training like that, make sure that you're wearing at least double ear pro, and understand that there's probably going to be glass particles that are going to be flitting around that you don't want to breathe in. So these are all just realistic things to keep in mind. But hey, if you find yourself in that real life scenario, you're probably going to be so amped up on adrenaline, you might not notice that stuff. So there is some auditory exclusion that takes place and that type of stuff. I've experienced that once in my life and didn't think anything of it. If that would have happened in training, I'd probably be deaf right now and signing to you guys or whatever. Right. So just again, everything for a purpose, and if you're not sure what that purpose is, there's a plethora of people out there. I mean, hey, I think we're a pretty good resource that people can reach out to and ask, hey, what's a methodical way I can go about training and developing in a building block approach.
Yeah,
just want to add one thing, and then I kind of want to bring it over to Blake, kind of feeding in, because I know something that Blake did today. But so again, when I'm going back to my experience when, I was doing training initially when I left the agency, and it was training people, again, when and wherever possible. So I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying. Wherever possible, of course, wear your eye pro and your ear pro, your eyes and ears, and your PPE, to use a military term, your personal protective equipment, right? But do not lose sight of what Patrick just said, or what we're kind of, I think, the gist of this. And I'm going to turn it over to Blake to get his comments, because he's an instructor as well. Well, I'm not anymore. He's actually the only certified instructor in the group here. But there's the training environment. And then, again, going to what we've all kind of alluded to, train as you fight, fight as you train, or intentional training. When Charlie Manson comes kicking in your door, you don't get to call timeout and say, let me put my eyes and ears on. And hey, this room, it's the same thing when it comes to, demolitions, explosives. Like, if you don't think about overpressure and what the effects of this, you don't get to pick and choose the battle. Well, I mean, unless you're like one of the bad guys, then but if you're a normal person, you're not picking and choosing the time and place of the battle. Right. So my only point in this, and I'm going to kind of bring it over to Blake and get his thoughts on it. It's like, yeah, when and wherever possible, of course, wear your, PPE, your eyes and ears, but don't lose sight of the simple fact that that's still not real. And you're probably not going to have that stuff on. And to my own little personal story, well, we always had that stuff on because we were jocking up, and that's what we called it, like a jock. We were putting on all of our pads and our gear, getting cool guyed up. And then we were going out with the intentional purpose of causing some trouble, right? Or getting into trouble, however you want to phrase that bullshit. Yeah. So we were already jocked up. We had all that. That's what we did, and if you got caught with your pants on, there's plenty of times where, like, next thing you know, you're running around and you don't have your gear and your kit on, and you're having to respond to a situation. Well, that's just called, again, that's the nature, the fluidity of any natural, whether it's a combat, military, or a civilian type of scenario. You're always going to be a little bit behind the eight ball. And part of that is both in your decision-making process, how you respond, and then how you're dressed and how you're prepared or equipped to deal with that accordingly. Now, Blake, I want to bring that over to you because, I know you just, I don't want to, can I say it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so you just did a class today. So
yeah, did a qual. I had a guy that he had missed the qualification for a class. So it was actually kind of more of a one-on-one thing. But that's the thing I tell pretty much everybody in my class is realistically, you never know what you're going to be using to defend yourself first and foremost. Obviously, try to be, proficient with whatever your carry piece is. Know how to do a field strip, know how to do different range drills with it, know, the ins and outs of it, and make sure it fits you properly. Before in the back room, we were kind of talking about backstrap reduction, beaver tail extensions, things like that. I mean, if you're really going to take it seriously, make that pistol an extension of your body. Because, the human being, the way we're built, we're quite good at pointing at things very naturally at a great distance. And the idea is carrying over that natural point method with your pistol as well. So, if you can have that one gun you're really great with, that's fantastic. But to your point about, you guys always went out kitted up, ready to go, or jocked up as you called it. Well, that's because it's a professional soldier. That was the purpose of it. If you want to take defense as a serious side, in a civilian world, you the day you go out your front door and you go somewhere where you feel you need to carry, that's your duty at that point. You've got to be aware and ready to use your firearm. But in the same breath, like I kind of alluded to earlier, you don't necessarily know what you're going to be using. So I try to tell people in my classes, shoot as many different platforms as possible, be as proficient as you possibly can, and then also try to train with other people. And if you can have someone you can go out to the range and shoot, one of the things that me and the other gunsmith really like to do, Patrick, is is load each other's magazines, and we'll put dummy rounds in, you know, maybe the 3rd or the 4th round, or maybe the 7th round in, or maybe we'll put 2 back to back, because, you know, I train that if you're out at the range and you're shooting and you have a hang fire or a misfire, we never know which one is which. So we have to treat it like a hang fire. But we don't have the luxury of treating that like a hang fire in a life or death situation. I can't go, hey, please stop stabbing me while I clear my pistol and get the next round into battery. We don't have that luxury. So the nice part with having a dummy round and having someone else load your magazine is, you know, 1, 2, 3, that 4th round. Okay, now I have 2 training benefits that come out of this. One, I can see, did I react some way to the platform itself? Did I pull, or did I flinch because I was anticipating the recoil? And then second off, now I have the opportunity to rapidly clear that gun, get back on target, and continue firing. So I think it's the little things like that. And there's a lot of those sorts of things you can do that can give your training purpose. And even if you only have the time to go out and shoot a magazine or something like that, but if you do those little things with somebody else, or you go with the intent of trying to build that thing you're working on, have that diagnosis and go, okay, you know, I'm over gripping right now, which is leading towards some tremors, or I'm under gripping, which is leading towards a failure to recoil the slide against my wrist. So, you know, it's very an individual thing, but you can tune your training to that. So, and to your individual need, I should say. So
hey,
those are great points.
Just because we're just going with the natural flow and not throwing cousin husband under the bus, but so everybody take what Blake just said into heart, and again, hit pause, rewind, and listen to what he just said again, because that happened yesterday. You know, grip is half the battle, in my humble opinion, right? It's half the battle for accuracy. It's half the battle for almost everything. If
how we interact with the platform.
Yeah.
You know,
what's that?
It's how we interact with the platform. You know, that's where all the magic happens, baby.
Well, the magic or the dark magic, because to your point, like if you've got a bad grip, you're going to be inducing failure after failure, and that's what actually happened. And so, you know, he's not, you know, an expert, but you know, he's getting better, and he wants to learn more. And, you know, I guess I kind of took it for granted that he would step up to the plate and remember what I taught him before. And he was having these, in Redbeard, I'll just, you know, you can chime in here, but like, and just kept having these misfires. And it's like, yeah, well, dude, well, then I looked at his grip. I'm like, well, you're causing it. I mean, I hate to say it this way, but yeah.
Well, and if I can just add real quick too, Mark, and I think, you know, Blake, I'm sure you've probably seen this before, out shooting with other people, and Mark, you've probably seen this. I'm sure most of us have seen some instance of this, but there's a lot of times to where somebody will, like, and I've even had friends that have, you know, they've come over to me when we're out shooting. They're like, yeah, like the gun stopped working. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The gun stopped? Like, what did you notice about the gun that like it's not working? And they're like, yeah, I went to go shoot and it didn't shoot. And then I'll look at their gun, and they're, you know, people have a tendency to like short stroke something or ride something into battery, or like there's so many times to where it's a human malfunction, to where it's like, look, like these are tools, like you can let them do what they need to do. You don't have to be, you know, timid about, you know, racking the lever on a lever action and worrying about breaking it, or racking the slide on a Glock and worrying about it being broken. And especially as it pertains to grip, like there's a lot of issues to where, like both Blake and Mark had mentioned, like, look, if you don't have a solid grip, you know, it's not going to be enough to allow that slide to come back and properly like do what it needs to do to function. And, you know, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but we are often our own worst enemy when it comes to the manipulation and use of certain weapon systems, right? So, and I would say most weapon systems, if not all weapon systems, like we are the biggest component to our own failure. So I think both of what you guys said is fantastic. And I do find, for whatever reason, I do find lever guns as being highly problematic with a lot of people. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but like people go to rack it and then like they'll bring it back up, but then it doesn't quite go into battery and people are like, it's broken. It's like, no, you're broken.
All right, hang on. We're going to come over to Paul because he was chuckling off screen. But before we do that, you know, we've all said that we got to get better at this. So let's explain some terms. So I don't know if people understand what we're talking about when we say battery. Most people probably will, but I'll turn it over to one of Redbeard or Blake, one of the quote unquote professionals here. Somebody explain battery to everybody. Blake, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, sure. And before I do, so that's actually one of the ways I start every one of my concealed carry classes. I tell people, I say, one of the greatest secrets on earth is the understanding of the nomenclature around the topic you're trying to learn. If you can start to develop the pathways in your mind to think in the language that's used, the jargon of the industry or whatever it may well be, your brain will actually start to go, okay, it clicks a little better. I can understand this a little better. So when we're talking about battery, what we're referring to is the chamber, or to really truly simplify it down, it's the hole which the round goes into that makes the boom. But battery is the technical term. Chamber is also a very acceptable term. But when we're talking about that, it's basically, you know, do we have something in the hole or don't we have something in the hole? Is that gun live or is that gun safe? Or is it, you know, maybe a failure to extraction, which is pulling it out? But again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds in the nomenclature, but I do think the understanding of nomenclature in the topic, be it from biology to firearms to just survival in general, or just how to be a man or whatever it may well be, if you can understand how to speak in those industry terms, that's really that great spell throughout history. That is the great magic of things.
Yeah.
So
Great point.
Mark, you're muted again.
Yep, you did it again.
I'm gonna stop doing that. I've just had this anyway, but I'm just gonna like sidetrack us real quickly because what Blake just said. I mean, just everybody look around you. Language is important. How we communicate. We have to have clearly defined definitions and understand what those definitions are. And if we start changing the definition of X, Y, and Z, well, look at the confusion that creates. And how do we then how do we properly interact as, you know, members of a family, you know, take all the way up to members of a military, you know, unit or law enforcement or a community or a society. I mean, that's it. You have to understand the nomenclature, the terminology. If I started, you know, if I was going to go pursue a degree in engineering, I better start learning that vocabulary, you know, whether it's math, engineering, ballistics, weapons, the military, whatever it is, you have to learn that. And I'm high-fiving you for saying that, Blake. I forgot about that. That was, because everybody's like, oh, you know, I put the clip in them. Like, oh, God.
Magazine, we have terms for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the big thing is I had a whole fancy thing I was going to say, but that's basically man really is only the language that we use. I mean, magic or language is the closest thing to magic that's out there. I mean, and if you can start speaking in it, your brain starts working that way, you know, and you can't articulate the concept of freedom if you don't have a word for freedom. You know, so it goes the other way too. If we devolve the language to such an extent where you can't articulate the desire to live free and have liberty and all of those concepts of America or the United States, then you can't even have them because you don't know what there are. You can't articulate that. So,
yeah, that's a great point.
Paul was laughing earlier, but Patrick's really laughing, kind of smiling right now. So, I mean, I don't know. You guys want to do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes next? Okay, there it is. Let's do it. First rock, paper, scissors. It's Paul. Paul had Patrick. Paul had scissors. Patrick had paper. All right, Paul.
I'll be real quick. So I think that Blake's point about the grip makes all the difference in the world. At least for, you know, again, we're talking about novices and entry level people learning this stuff. And I've had multiple family members that could shoot a wheel gun revolver perfectly fine at any caliber, but they had a tough time with their, you know, a 9mm or something. So, and because the grip was too weak, and if they had the two hands that they should have, you know, maybe at least that's what they were trained later, then that would have helped them get a better grip on things there. I don't know. I mean, I just think that jumped out at me as, yeah, I saw that happen, and the grip is the foundation. And if you don't have that, you know, forget it.
it's the number one thing that I see, and I think most people probably run into in training is the grip. It's that direct interface from the human to the machine. And, you know, in the industry, not to customers or clients directly, but we call it limp wristing. I mean, that's really what it is, because we, you know, it goes back to for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. You know, we have to be able to provide that wall for this big chunk of metal in the case of a semi-automatic sliding back to be able to grab the next round, to cycle it into battery like we were talking about, and allow you to fire. So, I mean, that's why I brought that up. That is the number one thing people have a trouble with, is their grip, realistically. If you can get that under control, you can pretty much shoot what you need to.
And at that point, just real quick, like, you at that point become part of that cycle of operation, right? So
absolutely,
it's like, so it's like that's something that
every one of these things, whether it's an edged weapon or, you know, a modern day firearm, dude, it is an extension of your body. You need to really, again, if you're a legitimate serious hunter, you're going to know everything about whether you're shooting a bow, a crossbow, a spear, what you are going to
you're using.
Yep. All right, let's bring it over to Patrick, because he was really laughing his ass off earlier about something. So let's give him a chance here, sir.
I was just thinking about some classes I've done for folks, and how the grip, all this stuff kind of comes into play. It's always the case, but I think it's just people getting comfortable with, you know, I'd rather have somebody that has no experience whatsoever than somebody that thinks they have experience or have gone through some training that's kind of half-assed, and you can tell pretty quick, right? So kind of going back to, you know, where I used to work, Mark used to work, one of the things that was always talked about is like, hey, if you're a professional, you're executing the basic fundamental stuff correct all the time. And that's what you're always striving to do, to the point where that becomes your habit. So basically being effective is just, you know, carrying out these habits all the time. And it's second nature. The other thing that kind of came into this, and I just want to,
if I can, just real quickly, I just want to echo what you said. It's a professional, like, you know, somebody's already talked about like some tier 1 units here at the beginning of the podcast. What do tier 1 units do? They execute the fundamentals, the basics perfectly every time. This isn't some wazoo, you know, like I'm shooting backwards, doing ninja flips. I'm doing the basics flawlessly every time, under duress, and through different environments and different conditions. So sorry, Patrick, I just wanted to point
that's perfect. Yeah. And, you know, I could take pretty much anybody, once you build them up with a requisite level of skill, and we could run them through the exact same qualifications that we did in our previous professions. And that's pretty high level stuff. We're talking like, you know, tier 1 level qualifications, and instructors and all that great stuff. But the difference is, you know, again, everything coming back to application. Why should somebody learn this? Because if you, in my mind, if you're going to carry a firearm, you know, from a legal standpoint, you know, that's a deadly force option. And if you pull that thing out, it's going to be life changing, one way or the other. Whether you use it or not, it's going to be life changing, psychologically, emotionally, and everything else, right? So if you've decided, hey, I am willing to go to that step to defend myself and my family, you need to take it extremely serious. There was I'll throw this out there and then open it up to you guys. There was a little placard that we had in one of my team rooms where I used to work. And I think it was taken from some SEAL Team 2 commander back in like the 80s or 90s or something, but it said something to the effect of there's no second place winner in a gunfight. Winners kill, losers get killed, fight to win, train to live. And if you saw that before you walk out on the range, it kind of, you know, set the tone, like, hey, pardon my French, we're not fucking around here. We're going for it today. You know, bring your A game. So that's something that I think the regular population can take on board as well, because, you know, like, again, it's a life-changing thing, and there is no second place, right? So get it right, be effective, and know what you're doing at a conscious level.
Blake, I want to bring that over to you. I think he's already hit on some stuff that I know you can probably add on to here.
Well, yeah, and that's why actually, Patrick, I wanted to bring you hit it on the head too. one about the psychological and the emotional aspect of it. And I talk about that with my people, my classes all the time. It's like, it's not just going out and being the cool guy with a pistol on your hip and all that. In fact, that's the opposite. If that's your mentality, leave that freaking gun at home. You have no business dealing with it. If that gun comes out of the holster, you have already made a conscious decision that you are willing to use that. You are willing to end somebody else's life. Because let's be honest, none of this bullshit shoot to maim. What are you thinking if you're doing that? If you've made the conscious decision of I have to defend myself with this firearm, well, you're going to eliminate that threat, and you do that by shooting center mass, especially from a civilian perspective. And to a greater point too, is like I also talk to people in my classes. I would rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. When it comes down to it, if I really truly believe that myself or my family's life is threatened, I've made that conscious decision that the consequences be damned. I'm going to protect myself, or I'm going to protect my family. Now that like you said, there are no winners. This is not a good thing. I hope and pray every day of my life I can go my entire life without ever having to use deadly force to defend myself or finding myself in a situation like that. And as painful as it is to say, we're heading into a world where at least the percentage or the chances of this happening to individuals is going up drastically. I mean, we can look to any regular city and see this increase in a crime wave where a proper response to somebody trying to pull you out of your vehicle to carjack you is to defend yourself. All right. And we know carjackings are through the friggin' roof right now. And this isn't to speak of a myriad of other crimes that are out there that someone does have a full right to defend themselves, because we don't know the level and extent that the hostile individual is going to take it to. Are they only going to partially beat my skull in, or are they going to fully beat my skull in? So there's a lot of very difficult decisions to consider when it comes to carrying and defending yourself. And one that if you are going to take concealed carry or open carry very, very seriously, or if you're going to take defending yourself and your family very seriously, you have to have these philosophical conversations with yourself and really do some soul searching. One, am I even capable of taking a life? That's the first question right there at the end of the day. So,
well, and not putting that philosophical side of it, because, I would say, fortunately, most of us will never be faced with that actual question, right? You won't ever have to, like, can I or can I not? I hope no one ever has to. Like, that's what a civil society is all about, where you don't have to be forced with that. I guess now philosophically that makes us weaker as a society, but let's table that for another time on the philosophical side. But something that you and Patrick have just brought up, I just want to throw this out there for, again, anybody watching or listening. Know your own state laws. Every state's going to have a couple different, there's going to be some slightly different perspectives or some criteria that have to be met that's going to justify the use of deadly force. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you and pretend what, I know what your state says or does not say. At the end of the day, though, I think in a general rule of thumb, and I'll turn it over to Blake before we kind of bring it over to Redbeard and Paul. Generally speaking, you're an innocent victim. Like, you didn't start the fight. If you were intentionally walking over and shitting on somebody's yard and they came out and confronted you, you're not really an innocent victim at that time. You got in a fight at a bar and so you got to be an innocent party. One thing. Some states will say, you had no other choice. Like, some states will say, like, well, you could have escaped. Now, I already, when I was teaching, I can articulate that. Like, no, running away, moving to another location. I don't know. Like, so let's say I've got people knocking on my front door. In the state of Minnesota, they said, well, why didn't you run out your back door? I'm like, well, I know what the danger is at my front door. I have no idea what the danger is at my back door. And criminal elements, you could sit there and say criminals are stupid all you want, but dude, they're not dumb. There could be somebody at the back door waiting for you to run out, and then that's where you're going to get ambushed and you're going to get killed. So, can you really displace? Can you move out your back door? Then there's the personal side, which isn't necessarily a legal condition, but like your family, okay, what I can do, can my 6-year-old daughter or son do? I mean, you know what I'm saying? So you've got to take that in consideration as far as your decision-making process, but then, it's got to be reasonable force. So reasonable force, I think people get wrong quite often. I'm not an invalid, but I'm really broken right now. You've heard me say in previous podcasts, I couldn't even fight off 6-year-olds right now. So and to Blake's point, and I don't know if those 6-year-olds are going to pull me down the ground and just do a Gulliver's travel and like secure me with ropes, or they're going to kick in my freaking head. I don't know. And then it's got to be appropriate to that, so again, loss of, life, limb, and eyesight is usually the kind of general rule. But boys and girls, know your state laws, know the laws, and, and work within those laws. But Blake, you kind of see where I'm trying to set you and Paul up for some comments here. I just want to throw that out there. And then one last comment, and this goes into what both Patrick and Redbeard had said. So I haven't manipulated my handgun outside of like my SIRT pistol every now and then for almost the last 3 years, just because I've just been physically unable. I've been laid up, back surgery, So going to the range yesterday. So here's where you've got to be, and I'm going to throw myself under the bus. You have to be brutally honest about your capabilities. Kind of like Patrick, I dedicated myself to learning. This is what my job was. So I try to be a master of those tools. I really needed to do that. For me, when it comes to a handgun, it actually started in the military when I was at a pistol competition and I came in 5th. And, there is no 5th place trophy, but the rest of the guys on my team gave me a 5th place trophy. And I was like, that's embarrassing. And I'm going to really apply myself to master a handgun. Of all the ballistic kind of weapon systems, it's probably one of the hardest, most difficult platforms to truly master. I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity in the agency. Kind of Patrick can chime in this. The training is unbelievable, right? And it was, but even in the military before I joined, I was still applying myself and on the personal level. And then I went and shot with Jeremy the other day. And, look, I'm still dumping in the A box, but I'm not dumping where my personal level of pride and what I know I'm capable of doing. So going into like what Blake's comment is, you've got to be working on this. If you're going to walk out the door and you're going to carry, or it's going to be a shotty inside your house, a shotgun or whatever, you better be freaking proficient with it, because dumping one round could mean it goes to, and if you live in an apartment complex, now that round doesn't hit Charlie Manson, it misses, and it's sheetrock between you and the next apartment, and then now it goes through and it kills little Jimmy, who was on, surfing internet porn, whatever, but now he's dead. So now from a personal protection
way.
Well, and now you're going to deal with just both the emotional and psychological impact of like, you just did that. And then there's possibly civil ramifications, legal ramifications. Yeah. So so I'm high-fiving you, Blake. I just love when you brought that up, because
great point.
I just don't think people take this stuff seriously enough sometimes. Yeah. It is our freedom. It is our constitutional right. But damn it, you don't just jump in, I'm going to go fly a jet today. Have you ever flown a jet before? No, but it's come on, man.
Well, and I think that's the thing. I mean, I know everyone here is probably a big two-way guy, that people should have access to these firearms. But I'm also on the other side too, where it's like, but they should be trained, shouldn't be required, but this should just be something you naturally do. Now, I want to kind of go back a little bit to one of the things.
Just to add into it, you naturally do it because you're not an idiot and you are a responsible citizen. So you know you need to do this. Yes.
Yeah, it's the fact that I want to be as proficient as possible, because what I'm talking about is dangerous. What I'm talking about is it's exerting deadly force potentially.
Yeah. And if you're not proficient, your family could die.
Yeah. Or like you said, somebody on the other side of some drywall, and that, so like, this is gear or guns and things, right? So as far as things, well, what do we feed guns? We feed it ammunition. So an understanding of basic ammunition and whatnot, like, a lot of guys like to use like 8-shot for home defense if they have drywall, because that's not going to pass through. But if you catch a chest full of that, it's still going to take you off your feet at 20 feet and in. But where if you run some double-aught, which yes, it's going to hit like a freaking mule, and that's fantastic in certain situations. Do you really want it to go into your kid's bedroom? Or plus P and plus P plus ammunition in your firearm? Is it sounds cool because it's faster? Well, yeah, that's great, but was that bullet even built to run that fast? Is it going to expand properly? Is it going to shear some of its weight off? Is it even going to balloon? Is it going to be targeted? Accurate at all? So yeah, that's cool. Or like the rip rounds, they look fancy. Oh my goodness, I'm excited about these. They are shit. They're shit. you're literally better go grab a 22 and just use that. It's better than that 9mm rip round, because when the trocores rip off, they just don't do anything. So knowing not only how to use your firearm, but what to feed it and when to use that proper, ammunition is going to be key. Now, one of the things I do want to touch on just on the law side, first off, I'm not a lawyer, so consult your lawyer on all this. I tell everybody in my classes this, but to my understanding, Mark, we do in the state of Minnesota have what's called a duty to retreat. So if someone is a violent threat, we have the requirement to make some distance between us, hey, back off, piss head, or whatever it is you want to do. When it comes to your house, I believe as far as the state of Minnesota rules, we are not a constitutional castle state. However, the law does recognize your house as, okay, you have nowhere else to retreat to. So you do have a little bit of extra defensive options inside of your domicile, but do know where those lines are and how to properly defend yourself.
And I've heard that as well, Blake.
Mm-hmm. Just something I did want to kind of clarify a little bit.
No, that was a great point. And not to belabor it, but legally speaking, and just look at when people who have clearly, we see the video, they clearly had a legitimate right to defend themselves. And then now they're being persecuted and they're in court. So to Blake's point and to Redbeard's point, and that was kind of where I was going with it too. You got to know the rules, the laws, and then you got to think that through, and you got to think through, again, to Patrick's point, dude, it's a tool in the toolbox. And if the toolbox consists of a bunch of people that don't think any one of us should ever be able to defend ourselves, and then you defend yourself, what is that legal battle? How much is that going to cost you? You might lose your job.
Than anything else.
Yeah.
Say that again, Blake. I talked.
That's uglier than anything else. What? At the end of the day, what's the job of a prosecutor? It's to get prosecutions.
Yep.
So.
All right,
remember
let's get some of the other guys in the fight. Patrick, Paul, who wants to chime in on basic, just what we were talking about, and then I'm going to shift it direction a little bit. Well, wrong side, Paul. See, that's what I do all the time. Use your other hand. If you want Patrick to do it, use your other hand.
Patrick is on that side for me.
Oh, is he? He's not.
Yeah.
See, that's where I'm so screwed up. I don't even know where you guys are. All right.
It's like Pac-Man. He points one way, it comes out the other,
All right,
Hey, so just real quick, I wanted to talk about something that kind of I think resonates off all this stuff. And I think I mentioned last podcast, I'll mention it again. So I'm a spear instructor under Tony Blauer, and he's done a lot of training for government agencies, a lot of law enforcement. And I've trained with him on a couple different occasions. It's a fantastic system because it's not a fighting system. It's more of a behavioral system and understanding how fear shapes and moves what we do. So the concept of we're talking about a firearm. We're literally talking about a life and death scenario. We're talking about the legalities that go with that. There's a few things that happen when we're faced with interpersonal human violence in any level, but the higher the level of violence, the higher the impact on us. So the first one, if you don't think that this is true, then I don't think you're being realistic with yourself, is you versus you. That's the first fight you're going to face. So these are called the 3 fights. You versus you, which essentially is fear management, right? So if you start thinking about your own thinking, a $10 word for that's metacognition. You start to identify, hey, what things usually boil down to is a binary thing. Am I threatened or am I challenged? Right. So if I'm threatened, I'm more concerned about what this outside person or group of people or whatever is going to do to me, as opposed to what I'm going to do. So if you can shift your thinking to, hey, here's what I'm going to do. And that only comes through training that's, kind of ingrained in your mind. So one of the terms that was used where I used to work, similar to Mark, is hey, you're training your dog brain. We're literally training canines when we're doing this stuff because we want it to be instinctive. So with that level of skill, that should get you to the point where you are challenged, right, as opposed to threatened. That's fight number 1. Fight 2 is you versus the actual opponent or group of opponents, enemies, adversaries, whatever terminology you want to use. That now boils down to the physical skill. That's where we're talking about. We're in the fight, whether it's an unarmed thing, it's some type of improvised stuff, it's a firearm. You need to have some capability to bring that to bear. And it's not going to come out at the worst moment when all of a sudden your heart is jacked up to 160, 180 some beats or whatever, somewhere in that range, and you're not used to being there. It's just not going to come out. So training these things under some level of stress goes a long way. And then the third fight, because we've kind of already articulated some of it, is you versus the system. Now that can be in military context. Oh my God, did I follow the rules of engagement in the States? Oh my God, am I going to get sued? Am I going to get, all these things going to happen to me? You can't get that. That can cause a lot of hesitation. The number one group of people that's impacted by that is law enforcement officers. And I know, because I was one. You're worried, if I take action, am I going to be sued? Is it going to be the end of my career? Am I going to be civilly liable? All these different things, right? You overcome that by playing that what if game, kind of like what we just did. So the nice thing about today with YouTube and all the social media and stuff out there, you can watch events and you can say, okay, I'm going to put myself in this individual's shoes, and seeing what they see and hearing what they hear. Would I have taken that action, or what else could I have done? Video is a huge thing. I mean, cops used to be on TV all the time, but when I was in the police academy, we watched so many cops videos, and we would, look at it from different perspectives, to include the bad guy, right? So when something went wrong, usually there's a reason we were watching it. Something went wrong, looking at it through the bad guy's point of view and pointing out, hey, here's what the officer was doing that wasn't necessarily, effective, that led to the aggression from this person. So being able to, number one, see it that way, but then also articulate, why did I take that action? Done a lot of training on the law enforcement side with SWAT, and having people articulate, does this meet your use of force? Did you override your use of force? Were you justified in doing what you were doing? Even though it's a very clear, situation in some of the scenarios we would run people through, they still couldn't articulate it. And then what we do is we put their use of force policy up on the board and say, okay, did you meet, portion A, B, and C? And if they did, yep, okay, well then articulate that. So it's starting to train to think in the aftermath of the event. So that way, hey, I didn't just murder some guy, or if he was a threat and I stabbed him or shot him and then continue to, shoot his body 18, 19 times, well, that's a problem. So knowing when to disengage and, either call the authorities or leave, depending on what the scenario is. These are good things to think about. So it adds more of a realistic framework to train under, as opposed to, hey, I'm just gonna shoot. Understanding that all this stuff is a decision-making process, and your physicality, your emotional, your decision-making, all this stuff comes into play.
I'm just going to throw this in there, and then let's come over to Paul and Blake. Redbeard might have a little bit to add to this too, but Patrick, great comments, and you just made me think of three things. Let's see if I can keep my old man brain on point here. But personal liability insurance. I knew there was trouble when I was being advised to make sure I have PLI. I'm like, dude, I'm doing operations that are approved. I've drafted con ops. I've got the approval. You're asking me to go do a Casey, a kill capture. I'm doing DA, direct action on a target. I'm going to do a call, whatever my operation was. But throughout that period, there might be we lost Redbeard real quickly. He's back now. Okay. But I'm doing this, and you're approving, the United States government, or an entity of the government that has the authority for me to conduct these type of operations. You're giving me these approvals, but then you're telling me that I need to have personal liability insurance. And I got to dance around this a little bit, but kind of near my way out, and this is maybe one of the reasons I left, is a colleague of mine. I saw him back at headquarters, and he shouldn't have been back. And I'm like, brother, what are you doing here? And then we started talking. And again, we weren't friends or buddies. We never went out and had barbecue or anything together. But then I heard his story, and I'm like, what? WTF? What the fuck? And I knew everything was, totally fucked up in FUBAR at that point in time. I'm like, my eyes had gotten a little bit, open. And then, but now bringing this into the kind of the civilian side, that the other aspects that everybody's talking about, you just look around right now, and maybe I should end with this one instead. But if you do conduct, and if you have to rely on a tool to defend yourself in today's day and age, even in America, you're guilty until proven innocent, it seems, right? To some extent. This is where I kind of want, Patrick and, Blake and Paul and Redbeard to chime in a little bit, because, there's this legal side of it. And I think, but then the third and final point is, to Patrick's point, is it seems to me that a lot of this is being done by design, is to get you to be recalcitrant, to be hesitant, to actually exercise your constitutional rights, to defend yourself, to train accordingly. Because I think where we started with this is like, I think each and every one of us is like, yeah, this is your constitutional right. This is your God-given right to defend yourself. But if you're going to go down that road, and Patrick, you kind of got me going on this, there's so many more aspects of this, and you better be prepared, and you better train for, you better take it seriously. And if you don't take it seriously, well, then you're no different than a drunk idiot who gets behind the wheel of a semi truck and then drives down, the wrong side of the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I did a good enough job there of kind of laying that out. Blake, you want to jump in on that, or Redbeard? You've been kind of, let's come to you first, then we'll come to Blake and Paul.
Yeah. So just real quick, I'm actually just going to hit on, it's interesting you brought up the liability insurance, because what we've seen in the last few years, and this is more of a tale of caution as opposed to a recommendation, and you'll figure out why in a few minutes here. But there's been this thing to where you have these companies that peddle out this stuff called carry insurance, and this is, on its face, it looks really, really good. However, what has been coming out about, and I'm not going to say specific companies, because I think if you do a quick search, you'll see a lot of them. Some of them are very prominent in the gun community, but there are companies that peddle out this carry insurance, right? Which is, when this first came out, everybody was like, oh my gosh, like you need to have insurance for, and in some states, it's, I think in California, I don't know if it's the entire state, but I believe that it's now kind of mandated. I could be wrong. It might just be in a certain area of California or certain city of California, but I believe people are required to have some type of carry insurance or liability insurance. But what people have found with these organizations is they're actually kind of predatory in their nature, in the fact that, which, I mean, it is, to be fair, like that is most insurance companies, but in the way of what they do is they put up a really good front, like, hey, get this, like, we'll defend you in court, so on and so forth. We're pro 2A. But then you also, what's been found is in these companies, you have people that don't actually withhold the beliefs of that they espouse. And moreover, in the small print, they're very, very specific about what they will actually cover and what they will actually produce an attorney for. And so if you're not paying attention to it, if you're even remotely perceived as being the criminal, even if you defended yourself, there is, at least I know of one company that, regardless, they will not come to your defense, because it's plainly written there. So I guess what I'm trying to tell people is, look, you're better off getting a good lawyer, like shop around for a lawyer, get a solid defense lawyer on a retainer, and ask them questions like, hey, what is your success rate for people in defensive shootings? What's your success rate in people that you've guarded for murder? Because and a lot of lawyers or attorneys will literally sit there and they'll gloat about their record. Then you go shop around and you talk to them. And Mark, you even mentioned this at one point, like, yeah, they can they can fluff themselves up to sound better, but lawyers will answer questions like this. And so go shop around. Don't do whatever you want, but I would not recommend going after the liability insurance. It's not what it's made out to be. Actually get a good lawyer that knows and has a proven record in defending their clients. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I didn't want to sidebars too much, but I want to come over to Blake and Paul. But I'm just I'm laughing and I'm smiling because of what you just said. But when I'm an employee of a government organization, I have specific authorizations, and not getting into Title 10, 32, 50, but like I have very specific authorizations, what I can and cannot do. Here's my conduct. I'm improved. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey boys, all you guys need to get PLI. I'm like, personal liability insurance. I'm like, for doing what the government authorized me to do. I'm like, what? You guys don't have my 6 when I'm out there. I'm the guy whose life is, and now you won't even have my 6 if, and again, without getting into too many details, but on this note, or if you want to take it in a slightly different direction, Blake, this is kind of up your alley. Paul, I think this is up your alley as well, or you've got some comments. Let's go to Paul first, and we'll end this little segment on Blake, and then we're going to kind of not change gears, but we're going to change gears a little bit. So, Paul, what do you got to say to that, sir?
Yeah, and I'll be brief, but I can say that the reason you needed that insurance is because of the legal system, the local AGs, all that stuff. When I first was trained and encouraged to get insurance, it was like, okay, well, this will save you money if you're in an incident, which will, cost you, it'll bankrupt you. If you're in an incident, whether you're right or wrong, it's going to bankrupt you. Today, it doesn't matter. They are going to potentially, and no matter what state you're in, it depends on the legal system, they are going to confiscate that gun, obviously, and potentially all guns. They will take all of your guns from you, and now you have no means of defense. So this has to be a last-ditch decision to make here.
No.
But the point is, that's why you needed that insurance, because they know that the legal system is going to go after you, even if you're in the right. And yeah, so I think that I agree with I'd take it on to Blake, because that's pretty much what I really wanted to get out. Just be careful.
Wow, and that's a sad state of affairs, though. I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I got three things that I kind of want to bring up. So first one, I actually want to go back to something Pat said earlier about talking about watching videos of police officers and their interactions with a suspect or maybe another deadly shooting or something like that happened to come up. This is one of the things that's unique about humanity too. It's one of the reasons that we've been able to develop to the cultural level that we have, and that's because we can kind of predict or play through scenarios of danger. Okay, we can go, hey, so there's a banana tree on the other side of that ravine. And if I want to get that banana to eat so I can have that nutrient, I got to get across this ravine. Well, if I just jump, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to fall and I'm going to break my neck. Okay, well, what if I made a rope and I swung across it or I made a bridge? We have the ability to deductively reason through things, develop pathways to get to that end goal we're trying to do. And because of the advent of technology, we have all the human experiences that have been recorded that we can now draw from as well and see real life data. And that kind of stuff is extremely beneficial for somebody that really is wanting to try to forecast, okay, how would I react in this situation? How did other people react in this situation? So I do like that you brought that up, Patrick. I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. Now, as far as the litigious side of things go with being a shooting offense or whatever it may well be, I'm going to kind of take my pro hat off and I'm going to put my Blake's the personal hat on here. And, my opinion as to why we live in this world, be it from the, hey, I'm working for the government as a cool guy running fast gear on a two-way range, and I have to have personal liability insurance, all the way down to the, I'm an average Joe who's going to Applebee's and this crazy crackhead just tried to shiv me with a homemade bone knife and I need to shoot him. All right. So there's a lot in between those two spectrums. But at the end of the day, what it is it's governmental bureaucratic bloat. And that's really what we're dealing with across the board, be it from our grocery prices to what they're trying to do bureaucratically with the firearms industry, to the individual who is trying to purchase that firearm, to the individual that's just trying to get gas or trying to just do a simple aspect of a daily life. We are dealing with bureaucratic bloat to the level of the Byzantium government. And that is really what comes down to one of the problems. That is why we're running into the, hey, I just defended myself and, I'm getting sued for it. Or like that old classic adage of the story with the 80-year-old lady who had a burglar try to rob her house and he fell through the skylight and fell onto a butcher's knife on the cutting table and he cut himself and he sued her. And guess what? He won. This is that litigious society we live in. And realistically, at the end of the day, that is truly the enemy of all free people is bureaucracy. Yes. I think, what was it? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams, was that his name? I mean, that was always his great bad guy in the books was bureaucracy, and he's friggin' right. So.
Well, and also from Brazil, bureaucracy is that great evil.
That's a twisted movie.
That's a great little segue to maybe a different conversation, but at the end of the day, though, you're right. I mean,
Now the third thing
I don't want to belabor it too much. I know we got a lot more to go through. Blake, did you want to add something? I'm sorry, sir.
No, I was actually going to kind of change the directions, and if you want to change it off this too, I had a third thing I wanted to talk about, and this goes back to the qual that I did today with the guy on the range. He has a bit of a medical issue that caused him to have some tremors to deal with shooting, and he was kind of asking, when I'm having these tremors flare up, how should I manipulate the firearm and everything? So this got into a conversation about gross maneuvers and gross controls. Mark, something we've talked about extensively, and I actually brought up your IFAC that you have, which I don't know what you call it, but that little Q kit pouch where you pull it up and it drops all the contents of the individual first aid kit down on the ground. So, hey, I got a bullet hole in me, I'm freaking out, I can actually get this stuff and get myself patched up sooner. And this is kind of that whole guns and gear thing we were talking about, is the other aspects of, okay, well, now we've been in a shooting, but maybe I'm injured. All right, well, it's a while before the first aid gets here. How am I going to take care of myself? And how am I going to deal with that situation where, holy crap, I've got adrenaline running through my body. My hands are shaking, regardless if you have a natural tremor or not. You've got a lot of physical effects that happen there. And there's a lot of different gear pieces that go into dealing with that. And whether it's on the societal level hasn't collapsed yet, so you still can get an ambulance to you. But, hey, I'm in northern Minnesota, and that could take 45 minutes. Yep. Or, society's completely collapsing and it's, oh shit, now I've got to plug my own hole, so.
Yep. Well, I like transitioning over into the things, part of the guns. But let's give, and I know Patrick wants to go into the things, especially based on what you just said and some of our other conversations and just even what we've said so far from my personal perspective. But let's give Paul. Do you want to add anything to that whole legal PLI part of it? Because otherwise, and Redbeard, with your permission, then I think let's start transitioning into some other aspects. Paul, but let's give you some closers on that one. What do you got, sir?
Yeah, real quick, just make sure you do. And I agree with Redbeard. Find a good attorney. Don't just go through some company that's going to provide you. Back when I first was trained, I would say, yeah, they provided the attorneys for us if it was necessary. Thankfully, I didn't need them. Mm-hmm. But today, you need to get an attorney, and they will tell you. They will give you the advice. And again, like the things I mentioned before, you're going to lose your weapons. And they'll give you advice on what behaviors to do after the fact. And those are things that are kind of key. And it doesn't guarantee you're going to be okay. Right. And it's sad. Right. It really is sad. So I agree with Redbeard, and just make sure you protect yourself. I don't necessarily think. Okay, I'm not going to give any opinion on whether you should get insurance or not, because you do you, as you say, Mark.
Yeah, I always say I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, I'm not here.
Yeah. No, none of us are.
Yeah, you're a lawyer.
Yeah. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you advice.
Yeah. So, if you're a lawyer, comment in the section down
but
below.
just make sure you do have a lawyer that you can call.
Absolutely.
Right. It doesn't have to be on retainer.
100%.
Absolutely.
Okay, so boys and girls, we kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on the legal side, but I think that's very important, honestly, because when we're talking guns and things, we're talking about tools in your toolkit that you're going to use to protect yourself, your family, society writ large. Well, the other side of that coin is society writ large right now is batshit crazy. And if you defend yourself and there's like 30 people who are like, no, you still might find yourself incarcerated. And my last comment, and then whoever wants to jump in on this, my last comment on this. So when I was training, and Blake, you can tell me if you think I'm full of shit here, but when I was training people, when it came to the legal side of things, boys and girls, you have to exercise your constitutional rights and you have to know them. And it doesn't mean you have to be a douchebag towards law enforcement, but just realize law enforcement isn't your friend. They're going to be like, oh, come on, Mark, tell me what was really happening. And I can't remember who it was. It may have been Patrick who brought this up. Dude, you are stressed out. You've just gone through something that you probably haven't experienced before in your life. Hopefully you haven't, right? And everything is going to be shut down. What you see, what you smell, what you hear. I've said this a million times in podcasts. The very first time I jumped out of an airplane, it was like looking through a soda straw. I had no idea what the hell was going on. I couldn't see shit. It wasn't until I had much more of those experiences that I was able to actually take a step back and see things in that full spectrum. Well, if you've not been in a two-way exchange or you've not been in a violent confrontation, you're going to be like, hang on, did I fire 3 shots or did I fire 5? Even that right there is something that could potentially hurt you legally.
Yes.
I've always told my students, and I don't know if we go to Patrick or Blake next, but it's as simple as this. You don't have to be a dick to law enforcement, but it's like, hey, that guy right there, or, you know, or a description of that person, that guy right there attacked me. There's the knife, there's the gun, whatever. Here's the witnesses. And that's as much as I'm going to say. I'm getting a lawyer, and that's all I got. Well, come on, Mark, you know, just tell us what happened. I already told you. That guy attacked me, or a description of that assailant. Here's the weapon. Here's the witnesses. I'm talking to my lawyer, and then I'll give you a full statement after that. That was always my, and again, we're not lawyers, everybody. So you do you, right? But that's what I would, whether that makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, or if it does make sense, leave a comment in the video. But Blake or Patrick, you were raising your hand there, which was so nice in school.
Yeah, right.
Very professional.
Teacher, yeah. So hey, coming from a law enforcement background, and I've had this happen to different members of teams I've been on with fellow officers that have been involved in shootings. What normally happens is there's an outside agency, usually from state police or somebody else, depending on where you are, that comes in to conduct. If you, as a law enforcement officer, you're involved in a shooting, and the first thing they do is they try to get just an initial statement of what happened, which you can be, you know, they encourage you to be very minimal with, very similar to that. They take the firearm and they give you, I think it's 2 or 3 sleep cycles before you actually come in to make official comments as to what happened, because, you know, you as an officer have been through a very traumatic event. These same, principles do not apply as a citizen, because the law enforcement officers want to come there. They want to find out, what happened, who's at fault. You know, they want to clear the scene, and people want answers then and there. You're, Mark, 100% right. Is, as a citizen, you don't, the police, depending, even if you were fully, cleared to shoot, you're not in any harm. Yep. It's, you serve yourself best just to tell the officers, hey, look, I'm just kind of freaking out right now after what just happened. You know, hey, that guy tried to hurt me. I took that action. You know, keep your comments to a minimum, and then talk to the attorney. Then get that attorney, right off the bat. Now, an attorney, if one way or the other, you're probably going to have to get one. They're going to ask, hey, what kind of statement did you give? And the more that you opened your mouth and let all this stuff out, keeping in mind that a lot of it might be emotionally driven. I mean, these are, like I said at the beginning, these are life-changing events. So this has to be taken seriously. They're going to want you to say as little as possible, and then, rest and go through the same process that like a law enforcement officer would. But that's not something that the general public knows. So if that's something that people are hearing from this, I hope they're taking notes. If you read your Miranda rights, fine. Okay, guess what? I'm still not going to say anything, and I'll go with you, but I'm going to get my attorney, right? Just not making comments, when you're in that heightened state of arousal. That's the best move.
I just want to add this, and let's come over to Blake, because you're in this space as well. What Patrick just said, again, I'm not in the class with you. I'm not teaching, but like that would be another thing that I used to point out. It's like, this is what happens for law enforcement officers when they're in a shooting. What Patrick just said, like they're not being interrogated and grilled or questioned like you are. Don't give into the battlefield interrogation or the tactical question. Hold your ground, because you have every constitutional right to do that. And just ask yourself this, whether you think we're full of shit right now or not, ask yourself this: why would the police lawyer, right? Because they have lawyers, provided for them, right? That's a little bit of a difference between, us and them, right? Us, them being law enforcement. Maybe they have got their own personal attorney, but there is an attorney available for the law enforcement officers. We don't have that. You have to go get your own attorney. But what Patrick just said, they're not sitting there. They're not being TQ'd. They're not being interrogated. Battlefield interrogation is, like the question, well, what about this and what about that? And why did you do this? They don't answer any of those questions. It is that black and white. I came up, I had a call for this. It was a domestic or whatever it was. I approached the door. individual, one came out of the door. He had a handgun in his waist. I told him to, keep his hands where I could see, and then he didn't do it. And then, he reached for his waistband and I fired. And you don't even say I fired 5 rounds because you don't actually probably know unless shit, Jeremy, we were just at the range the other day. We weren't even under stress. Like, hang on a second. Was that 7 or was that 10 rounds? I don't really think about that. And every one of you should be laughing right now. That happens when we're not even under stress. Imagine what it's like under stress. Did I do a mag dump or did I fire 5 shots? You know what? Honestly, I don't fucking know right now because I'm freaked the F out. So I love what Patrick just said right there. So, hey, if cops have that opportunity, look, and cops are just citizens like us. Actually, if you want to take it down that road, there's more of legal obligations for law enforcement that they should subscribe to or ascribe to. But constitutionally speaking, we have the same rights. We have the same right to an attorney. We have the same right to, not perjure ourselves. Dude, if you want to be compliant, I was walking down the street. Redbeard jumped out of an alley. He had a knife, jumped out of a doorway, had a knife. He approached me. I drew my handgun. There's there's Redbeard's body. There's the knife. There's the shell casing. These are the witnesses. That's all I'm saying to you. Other than that, I'm not talking anymore until I get an attorney. Patrick, is that even too much? That might even be too much.
Yeah, man, I wouldn't even say that much. The guy tried to hurt me. I stopped him, whatever. I'm freaked out. End of story.
Yep.
Basically, you're only saying that, hey, I don't want to, I'm hoping you don't cuff me, but if you do, I'm still not going to say anything.
Yep.
Right on.
Well, and
Blake?
I was going to say, like, first off, again, I'm going to reiterate this point. I am not attorney. This is not legal advice. Seek legal counsel for questions regarding to these things if you want the proper answers. However, what I always tell my clients is, you're going to get your gun taken. You're going to go to jail. They're going to try to question you. They're going to try to question you again, and they're going to really try to question you again.
And they might question your family members as well.
Yep. Yeah. In the day and age where we have red flag laws and things like that, I mean, who knows how far they cast that same net? It could be cast wide. And that's why really less is more. Listen, I'm with Patrick completely. It's all right. I was freaked out. I defended myself. I mean, do what you got to do. Here's my attorney's number. That's all I'm saying. Less is more, man. The less is more. And that's the thing. It's not that they're not your friends, and it's not that they're bad guys. They're doing a job over what just took place. So, and no human is omnipotent. We don't know what happened. So their job is to try to get information right away, and you're freaked out. Just shut the hell up. Like, I mean, that's literally one of the best pieces. Just shut up. No.
Yeah, and just my last comment, because it came up as you were talking. I just remembered that's part again. I haven't been riding this bike for a long time, so I've forgotten shit. Don't even forget your family members. If you're going to carry every day, and the world's getting shitty, and you live in an urban environment or even a rural environment, you better also be briefing your family members. Like, the cops could show up at your house and just ask for permission to come in and look around. Dude, and if your wife doesn't know any better, or your husband doesn't know any better, like, not without a warrant, you're not. You're
no, you're right.
They're going to ask you questions like, okay, so what kind of gun does Mark carry, and what is his social? See where I'm kind of going. So it goes, and I'm going to turn this over to Paul, because I think this goes into also the social media realm. You better even be cognizant and careful about what you're posting online, or shit. In today's day and age, I could like a post that every one of us knows is a funny ass meme, like the one, goddamn fingers, way over there. I don't know where it is on everybody's monitor. It's a funny meme. It's not meant intentional. It's not it's a meme. But even in today's day and age, they'd be like, well, look, that displays or gives us an idea of his mindset. Paul, see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I just want to respond to the Blake and Patrick first. Is when the advice I've been given, when this happened, I felt my life was in imminent danger. Move on. That's it. That's all you say. Keep it quiet, but make sure you say your life was in imminent danger, because that's where it qualifies as a self-defense. And it's that terminology that's going to be used if the cop does document that, and that's legal advice from a lawyer, not me. That's not from me. So as far as the other things, when it comes to cybersecurity and online activity that everyone does now, right? Everyone has a phone, and hopefully, you monitor the younger ones, but either way, what you want to make sure that you do is that you protect your family, your friends, and everything from a number of things. But one thing I think that fits into this category is swatting, right? If you get into an online activity and something happens and they call the police and say this person's in this house and this address and does this, okay, and then SWAT comes up to your house. Honestly, I don't know that there's much you can do to prevent that other than to stay the heck off of the social media and stay away from interactions. However, one thing you can do to protect yourself is to get to know your local sheriff. Okay, get to know them, interact with them, all of them. You don't have to be best buds, but get to know them so they know who you are. So when this report comes in and they see this, they're like, well, we know this person. You could say, well, my name is Paul and I have an online presence and, sometimes I get threats and stuff. So I just want you to know, give them that type of thing. Now, if you're not online and, you have a kid that's interacting with somebody on Facebook or Twitter or X, and, they could also have that happen. So the fact that you get to know your local law enforcement is the best thing you can do. That's really, because there's no 100% answer for that, but that will help you at least minimize the issue. Now, if it comes down to the feds coming in, I don't know if they're going to contact the local law enforcement anyway. So that's another story. Maybe Patrick can help me out with that one. I don't know.
Based on recent events, they probably aren't going to talk to anybody, and they're just going to flashbang and shoot you in your toilet. But
and kill your dog.
Yeah, and kill your dog.
I love killing dogs.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get a little emotional when I'm Italian. I talk with my hands.
One quick comment, and then I know Blake, and I want to, but I'm going to switch directions here real quickly. Well, but no, actually, I'm going to shut up. Blake, I think you've got a response here.
Well, the couple things that Paul said that I actually really, really love. And it reminded me of something a dear friend of mine said one time about raising children. He goes, if I was ever to have a son or a daughter and they were coming up in this modern age, you know what I would do for training them on or explaining to them how the dangers of technology of the internet can be is I'd set a laptop and a pistol right next to each other on the table and go, what's the difference between those? And let them, kind of stumble through it for a little while and go, what's similar to them is that they can ruin your life in many different ways. And swatting's a big example of that. I mean, swatting's a very serious thing. For years, I've been listening to what the mainstream would call alternative media, but really it's people like us sitting there taking in information and giving you their opinion. And in multiple cases, I've seen it happen even in cases on live streams where swatting's taken place. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of his political take on things, but I do respect other opinions. Tim Pool is one of the prime examples. About 3 years ago, I think Tim Pool was swatted like 7 or 8.
That was a lot of times.
Like 6 months, man. Bomb threats. He had the police out there. And what actually was that protected Tim Pool on his quote unquote compound, because it was his filming studio, is exactly what Paul was talking about. He had a relationship in his local community. He had a relationship specifically with law enforcement, and he had some trouble with law enforcement trying to get to the bottom of it, and he was getting drug around, and that's going to happen. This goes back to that bureaucratic bloat that I was talking about beforehand. But simply knowing your community, and that's beyond law enforcement, your community. This is your most important piece of kit of guns and things that's out there for protecting you and your family. It's knowing your neighbors. It's knowing your community. It's knowing how they're going to behave in a time of crisis. It's preparing each other for that inevitable time of crisis, whether it's when the power goes out because of a storm or because the power actually went out and holy crap, this is now coming down. I don't think that's going to happen, but this is your greatest tool. This is the greatest thing to lend towards survivability for you and yours is your community, having a respectable understanding with those in your community, being that pillar of your community that, really was one of the core fundamentals of America for the longest time. It was knowing each other. It was helping each other. So I would say, one, the tech thing, yeah, man, that's as dangerous as a firearm ever is, and if not bigger, because it can ruin your life in ways that a single shot to your head, at least that's just over. It's a whole different world now, man. And kids, everything you do online is freaking permanent. So
it's all about protecting yourself.
It's more
and
likely
your
that
family.
you'll have that situation.
mm-hmm.
It's more likely that you'll have that situation today than you will with a firearm incident.
Absolutely, Paul.
Yeah.
You're 100% on that. And I just read a study, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but it was talking about the Zoomer generation, and I might have talked about this last time too, so I hope I'm not bringing this back up again. But it was talking about their difficulty with using legacy technologies. Where basically this younger generation, they can't use the old ways of securing yourself. If you have a keyboard, that input's difficult to them because they're used to touch screens. But your Zoomer generation is the most likely generation, I believe, to lose access to their social media, more so than the Boomer generation. They have a higher chance of being scammed than even the Boomer generation. And it's because, for one, they were raised with tech being ubiquitous, but where, like my generation as a millennial, we kind of walked the difference between, hey, I remember using facsimile machines, and when Facebook first started, now we're in that post generation of social media and that pre-generation of social media, and the post generation of social media, they look at the world in an entirely different fashion as far as technology goes, and it destroys them. Oh man, does it destroy them? Some of the shit that I did as a kid, if it was filmed, oh man.
Yep.
So I think Paul, myself, and then Patrick right below us, we're the actual generation where we actually were riding bikes without helmets and we threw rocks at each other. So Lord only knows what would have happened to us had there been cell phones and shit back then. Parents would have been in jail for it's 8 a.m. on a Saturday. Get the fuck out of the house. And then, I don't want to see you until 6 o'clock or something at night. Parents would have been like child protective services everywhere, whatever. Hey, Redbeard, if you want to respond to where we were just kind of going in that general conversation, because then with everyone's permission, I'm going to change it over into the things aspect of it, because I know we got a couple, as always, we've got a little bit of time hacks for people. So let's give Redbeard the last comment on where we were just kind of going. And then I want to transition, because it isn't just guns. There's so much more. Matter of fact, truth be told, we're not even going to do this justice in 2 podcasts. Just plain and simple. I already know that right now.
I'm already planning for a third, honestly.
Yeah. We'll do that in the next decade. So,
So everything for the most part, honestly, Mark, I think we kind of nailed it. We have so many great minds in one area, which I feel very fortunate to have. And I'll say this again at the end, but thank you guys for coming on, because this really does provide perspective and nuance from so many different areas that there's not really anything more that I feel like I can add without becoming a broken record. However, I will say there was something that Mark actually brought up to me that I'd like to actually kind of cover real quick through the private chat. And I think I know where you're going to go with this, Mark, but I don't know if you're going to put something else onto it.
I suddenly feel like I'm on the hook.
What's that?
I said, I suddenly feel like I'm on the hook for something.
Yeah. So it was from yesterday though. And it was, when we were sighting in the rifles, and I think what we were talking about in private message. So if you want to do that, if you want to talk about that real quick, because I actually thought it was interesting that you said what you said. So,
well, I hate to say this way, Redbeard, but we've kind of moved past that, and I kind of want to give everybody more time. But I think I'll just say this, and then you can respond to it and add to it what you want, because it is important. But I do want to go into this the things aspect of it. I guess this is part of it. So, you don't know what you don't know, and don't assume what you think you know. So, Redbeard's shooting in. Again, I'm green light, right? I can say this.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So he's shooting an AK platform, and I've been around AKs, both. I've been around AKs, and I'm sitting here, and I'm like, okay, cool, da 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 da. And then it comes to find out it's a 5.56 platform. But I'm like, dude, it's barking like a 7.62. How is that? And just on a funny note, just because we have to add a little humor, my vehicle was like 7 yards. I'm not even shitting, boys and girls. It was pretty damn close to 7 yards away. My passenger door was open because we had moved some stuff in there, but I'm 7 yards away from the table, the shooting table. His ejection port was putting rounds into my freaking vehicle. It was like pinging off I'm like, what the hell? I had to go shut the door and roll up the window. Like, I don't want that shit in my vehicle. But it was barking like a 7.62. And come to find out, it was a 5.56. So, I'm not 100% sure where you want to go. That I kind of lost that.
Nope.
It was salient when it was brought up about an hour ago. But
and there is something that I think is a good segue for what we are going to talk about, because look, and I'll just say it right now, like, let's look at the situation that's going on in the Middle East right now between the Palestine and Israel, right? When you look at the weapon platforms that are being employed on both sides, I think especially Mark and Patrick and Blake and Paul, I don't know if you've been around like AK platforms, but there's a pretty distinct sound that AKs make. And what I think is interesting is, and I mentioned this to you the other day or yesterday, Mark, is what a great cover that is to have something that sounds like a traditional AK, and it is an AK, but it's not shooting the traditional AK round. So you're putting off like this noise, like it's something that you're used to hearing or that you can identify, but it's not. And it's in, how can something like that actually play into, like how you would approach something? Because if you're hearing something and you're like, I know that sound, like this is what that sound is. This is kind of what I can expect. And then you get over there and it's something totally different, like that's something to consider. But whether it's something that is here domestically, or it's something over in the Middle East, as it pertains to like active ongoing fighting. Like I would even say it harkens back to our conversation about situational awareness in the previous podcast, right? Like it's one of those things that it kind of throws you for a loop. And I mentioned to you, Mark, like I think a lot of that is also very much predicated on the muzzle device I have. Like it really lends itself to putting out that noise. And
it has to be.
Yeah. And
there was no way. Like, again, I've got 30 years behind a 5.56 platform. I know what a 5.56 sounds like.
Yeah.
I know what an AK sounds like. I was like, like that's barking like a 7.62. And you're like, oh no, it's 5.56. I'm like, say, well, what? Insert your meme right here. Well, what?
Yeah. And so I think like sometimes like when you're looking at stuff like this and you hear something it sounds exactly how it's always sounded, but it subverts that expectation. Like that can either be advantageous or it can be very disadvantageous. And so I don't know if that actually helps breach the subject, but I want to know what you guys have to think and what your perceptions are on that.
Well, with your permission, I'm going to turn that into we're getting into tools in the toolkit and the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures. So yes, from a tactical perspective, I'm shooting a platform that fools you and makes you think it's something else. That could either be a pro or a con. I mean, let's set that to the side. But I kind of want to bring this over to Patrick because it does feed into, again, we're talking guns and things. Things can be deception. Things could be other weapons platforms. I'm big into archery. Not even going to talk about it tonight because we're kind of running out of time. But archery is another tool in your toolkit, and that could also be from a tactical perspective, from a life-sustaining hunting, procuring food, during the zombie apocalypse perspective. And we just mentioned like the Middle East and the unfortunate atrocities that have just taken place, where people are being butchered, burned alive, decapitated. But then to that point, Jeremy, here in modern America, that's happening on our city streets, and it's happening in our rural areas too. So like evil is walking around. So it's a tool in the toolbox. You got to figure out what you want to do. And I know I'm just going to turn this over to Patrick first. because I want to give you time, and I think that's going to shape the next conversation. Because Patrick, I know this is something that you're both very proficient in, you're very passionate about. They're just tools in the toolkit. So guns and things. So we just spent a lot of time talking about guns. What about some of the other things, Patrick?
Yeah. So talking about, the gun. So first of all, on the noise issue that Redbeard just brought up, we're used to hearing these things like at a range setting, a lot of times outside, that type of stuff. Right. If this was, and I've been around firearms going off indoors, it's very, it's hard to pin down, right? Like if you're outside and you hear something coming from, a few hundred meters away, okay, maybe you can kind of like, direction find into like the general area that's in. Inside, those things like echo and it reverberates. And sometimes it may take a few to figure out, hey, where is this coming from? Because if sound bounces off of walls, you might run towards a threat inadvertently, right? So taking that pause to understand, hey, whoa, what am I taking in? And you can move to cover, just make sure that you're keeping your head on a swivel, that type of thing. So back to things, we already brought it up, and I think that anybody who's going to step into this realm of carrying a firearm or taking home defense seriously, that type of stuff, if you're not taking life safety serious, if you're not learning how to use, tourniquets and pressure dressings and gauze and that type of stuff, you're again, it's not very realistic. I'd rather have somebody that's got that skill than can shoot, because if you're engaged in anything, self-aid is first, and that's kind of goes back to like a military concept, or what where Mark and I used to work for sure. It's like self-aid first, right? So you need to learn how to utilize your kit to save yourself, number one, if you can. Then it goes to buddy aid. Then it goes to a higher level of care and transporting people and that type of thing. So I think that's huge. Moving on to, I don't know if we want to address a couple other things, but I like to look at things from the terms of an individual, human being. The first thing that's going to happen is your thought process, right? Where's your mind? What's your awareness like? And now all of a sudden, if you're confronted with something, what options do you have available to you? The second piece is like your actual physical body. Am I capable of moving to a certain area to get away from a threat, or to grab, a loved one or somebody else and pull them to safety and that type of stuff? So are you physically capable of doing that? Then you start adding to that, right? So like, now all of a sudden, let's say that I'm on a business trip or something like that, and I can't carry my firearm for whatever reason. Maybe the city that I'm in doesn't allow it or whatever. What can I use that's improvised that's going to allow me to, have some type of an effect, on a target? Can I carry a pen, a pencil? Are there tools? I'm a big fan of flashlights. So small tactical flashlights that you can carry anywhere. And you can explain to law enforcement or a TSA and say, "Oh, it's my flashlight." "Oh, yeah, okay, no big deal." In a nighttime low light setting, if you hit somebody in the face with that flashlight, and then, with the light first, and then if you had to, jab them with a hammer fist, you could cause some pretty significant damage. They're blinded. Now that allows you the opportunity to leave. Because this is this is a, hey, I'm getting away and I'm getting to safety, and that could allow you to do it. So there's a whole plethora of things that lead up to even getting into, okay, where are we getting to the firearm, the pistol, then the rifle, then the bolt gun. These are in our world, the military world, ranges of combat. It goes all the way out to like maybe 1,000 meters, all the way up to you in contact with another human being. And you need to be proficient, or at least think about how to become proficient in each one of those ranges.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off. I just want to throw this out there for you and the group, because I think this is the direction I want to take the conversation here for the next, 10, 20 minutes, whatever we got left. But you talk about flashlights. I've said this in other podcasts, or a whistle. Like a whistle isn't going to be a combative weapon. It's going to be it's going to draw attention. So, and for some criminal elements, that might be enough to cause them, distress and make give them some pause, and that gives you a chance to escape, or they run away. But flashlights, with modern flashlights, it's unbelievable. And I'm just going to give a plug for Black Scout. And I'm just full disclosure. I make products for Black Scout Survival. I make a couple products for him, but he has got a personal defense flashlight. I don't know off the top of my head what the lumens are, but with modern flashlights, you're putting out some serious effing
Oh
lumens.
God, yeah.
But then to Patrick's point, it has a self-defense bezel, which you can take on and off. And you can take the bezel off and put a red lens on there if you want. But that self-defense bezel on his flashlight is un-effing believable. And I'm going to leave a little link down below. I've got no saying this. I don't get any money off any of this stuff, but I'm here to tell you, I own one. I bought one for Cindy, my main sewer. I'm here to tell you, if somebody's there, that light in the face to what Patrick just said. But then if I had to start doing strikes, you know, and my God, you struck and then ripped with that thing. Matter of fact, I don't know, I ain't going to do it this time, but I'm here to tell you, if you can see the strike bezel, like you got about that much between, this is the light itself. And then my thumb is where the curvature of this strike bezel comes out. Holy effing shit. The first time I got one, and this is at my old place, Jeremy, you remember the original bunker?
Yep.
And that picnic table by my Viking fire pit. I just dug it into the picnic table and pulled. And that was wood. What that would have done to flesh, to Patrick's point, holy effing shit. So so that's where I kind of want to go. Let's just maybe go in that direction here. These other things, whether they're lights or hands or edged weapons or something, like everybody take it in the direction they want to go. Patrick, you just kind of started that. So let's come over to you. And then, Paul, no, that's a good point. Ooh. Actually, Paul, no, so a little, you know, behind the scenes chat. Yeah, Paul, no, you're absolutely right. I don't know what TSA's rule is. As a matter of fact, I think there are some things that are, you know, inappropriate or illegal. So again, none of us are lawyers. We're not trying to give you legal advice. Know the laws, but I do think you're right, Paul. I think that you need to take that bezel.
Yeah, in context to what he's saying too, is he's talking about the bezel length and like what is legal as far, because that happened inside of our little chat we have down here. One of the things I'd say, you know, as far as things go, if we're using them in an either defensive or an offensive way, your biggest one's your environment. Excuse me, everything that's around you. You know, it's like Patrick was talking about, okay, hey, we just discharged a firearm inside of a house. Well, holy shit, is that disorienting? That's a weapon in and of itself. You get a night shine in your eyes like a brilliant light. Well, guess what? You ain't seeing anything. That's a weapon in and of itself. You know, I mean, so it's using the environment to the best of your ability with what you have available. I mean, you know, you find yourself in a situation, hey, I don't have a pistol. I don't have a light with a big bezel. I don't even have a knife. Well, what's the first thing you're going to go to when you go into a hardware store? If you're trying to defend yourself because you're getting chased by people that are trying to kill you. Well, one of the first things I'm going to go for is wasp spray. And I'm going to go for their eyes. You know, it's using the environment. And now, okay, that was not legal advice to do that, because holy crap, that's probably lawsuits out there. But you're talking about a potent self-defense weapon that is readily available to you anywhere in the world. I mean, whether you're in Gaza Strip or New York City, you probably can get some Hornet spray. No.
Hey, I just tried to message Paul. It's a little bit too late, but like, you were main screen and then I could see it, but like once you said the wasp spray, Paul got really excited. So yeah, there you go. All right, let's bring it over to Paul.
Wasp spray kills everything, stink bugs, everything. You know, it is the best defense mechanism out there. That's in a spray format, and it goes 12 plus feet.
Yeah, I mean, 20 feet to blind you.
It is a proven solution.
Unlike most pepper sprays, unless you're getting like, you know, military or law enforcement grade OC, Patrick, you can check me on this. Like military law enforcement grade OC, Olorio resin capsicum OC, those kind of canisters, they go in a nice stream and they go for distance. Most of mace, you know, pepper sprays that people get, it's all over you. You're more than likely to, you know, to damage or injure yourself than you are the assailant. But that's why Paul just did the big, you know, wasp spray. Dude, that shit would go 20 to 30 feet in one little stream. He's not joking there.
Yeah. So anyway, the environment is your best friend. I mean, realistically, and I guess that's my point. The ultimate thing that we have access to is the world around us. So use it. You know, two things in tandem. What sits between our ears and the world around us, we are very dangerous individuals if we're capable and we keep our head on a swivel and keep our wits about us. So
Well, to
And the
your
word-
point, as I bring this over to Redbeard, I'll come to you, but
Yeah.
we're probably about to say the same thing. I mean, Blake, I think what you just said, that's the most important is
Yeah.
it's your mind. It's your mind is the most, I know it sounds cheesy to say
Yeah.
this, but you are the most dangerous weapon
Yes.
if you've got a good enough mind for it.
Yeah.
Because you will find things, human weapon system.
Yeah,
Okay, Patrick,
100%.
you're going to have to explain that, but yeah, I get it. But Redbeard, you know what I'm saying? And then we're going to come over
Yeah.
to Patrick here.
No, yeah, and I'm just I'm gonna have a moment of cheese, and then I'm actually just gonna elaborate on that a little bit. But we've all seen the movies, right? You know, Rambo First Blood Part 2. He looks at him, and he's got all this fancy gear, and Rambo sits there and he looks over at him, and he's like, I always thought the mind was the greatest weapon. He's like, times have changed, dude. Times haven't changed. Like, you're either gonna go about something with the best thing that you have and be the most effective person you can be, or not. And it doesn't matter how good the gear is, and it doesn't matter how flashy it is or how Gucci all of this shit is. Like, if you can't use it to its fullest extent, like, it doesn't really matter. And that's just it. Like, Patrick nailed it when he just sent the little message through private, because we are, like, in the end of the day, like, we can have the best gear in the world, but look, if you're not getting out there, and this has been said ad nauseum, I think, by every single person here at this point, if you're not getting out there, if you're not employing the stuff you intend to utilize, and you're not training with it, and you're not doing so on a consistent, regular basis, and you're not learning what its pros and what its cons are, what its strengths and weaknesses are, because everything has it. You are the biggest strength or the biggest weakness, regardless of what the gear is. And people, that is one thing out of this entire discussion, whether it's about the gun portion, whether it's about, talking about, look, we need to prepare because of all these domestic issues or foreign issues. In the end of the day, like, our rate of success is very much starts with us, and it can be improved by our proficiency with gear.
And our interactions with other people who are better than us
100%.
or have a different perspective. Yep. And that's what we're trying to do here tonight. So Patrick, dude, human weapon system. I mean, yeah, dude, you could probably talk for like 3 hours on that, but let's just, let's do it for about 5 minutes or so.
Okay, so I'll try to break that one down. The concept of this gets more primal, because a lot of what we've discussed tonight deals with tools, right? So what we don't want to have is tool dependency, because let's say absolute worst case scenario, you can't access anything, because guess what? The fight picks us sometimes. A lot of times that's how it happens, right? We're not going to seek it out. It happens, and it happens in that moment and space and time, and you are who you are at that particular point. So what I've done before in the past is on the military side and other places, I've given a scenario because we get into the human weapon system, meaning your body has a lot of natural weapons to it, and you don't have to spend 20 years of martial arts to master this stuff. Like, you can do it in a relatively short period of time. But the scenario, and it comes down to decision making, is in this kind of, if everybody takes this little ride with me for a second, I think it'll be good discussion. You're at home in your shower after a day or whatever, you're lathering up, and all of a sudden you hear a crash or a bang. You step outside, you get to the shower, like, hey, is that what I thought it was? And you hear some more crashing and banging in your home, and you look over, you look out the shower, and you see, and I'll show a picture of a super jacked 6 foot plus, Hell's Angel guy who's obviously spent time in the pen, because he's got, his tats all over the place and that type of thing. And then I literally leave people with this, and I'll put it to you guys. That individual notices you, and as you make eye contact, he starts to close the distance between the two of you. And then open-ended question, what do you do? A lot of folks, that from my experience, I mean, I could, you want me to pause it here, Mark? Do you guys want to take a shot at that, or do you want me to just go ahead and
I honestly, because I know we're kind of getting near the end, and everybody's got to bounce. I think that has to be where we go with part 3. We start with these. Okay. We start with the things like this, because look, I'm just going to say this. I love your, and if
I'm
you're
invested,
a person,
dude.
Well, if you're a person watching or listening to this, and if you haven't done that role playing, if you haven't lived the scenario that Patrick just threw out there, you're probably doing yourself and your family a disservice. You have to start thinking this kind of stuff through. And that's a really effing scary. You're probably naked. You might have a towel around your body. X, Y, and Z things are going. So I don't necessarily want to respond to that other than to say, I think we have to do part 3, and the next part has to go into more of the things part of it, because this is one of the things. And I'll just say this: I have a shower knife, and I'll even take a picture. It's ceramic; it's not metal. I mean, like, yeah. I mean,
of course, now that I've said this, everybody's going to start putting pistols and knives in their bathroom and stuff. And, what I do is I try to take all that stuff away from people and get it down to like just a physical level and seeing what the willingness to go offensive is. So, and we'll get more into that. Maybe we'll actually show the stuff for the next podcast.
Well, okay. So the only thing I'm going to say, and then Redbeard, I'll give you a chance here. Is Patrick. So yeah, let's think about this. Let's set this up for the next time, because then what is the scenario? I mean, obviously, if I'm in the shower, I'm in my own house. So I know everybody might think I'm a weirdo, but right here over that shoulder, there's actually a spear. I'm like a no shit spear. I mean, like, so I've got an 8-foot standoff with a blade that can kill a boar or a bear, right? Over there, there's a katana. I've got a ceramic knife, so to Patrick's point, have you thought this through and have you prepared for it? So I think we should save that for the next time and go into more of the things. And then I get a chance to talk archery, because I'm big into archery too, but because that's also guns and things, right? That's survival, and it's not necessarily personal defense, but to your point, Patrick, and then I'm going to shut up and let's turn it over to whoever wants to chime in next. You're not a weirdo for thinking about or where are your frying pans? Where are your knives, your culinary knives for cutting food? How am I? I'm under 6 feet. My mobility is limited. How am I going to beat that assailant that Patrick just described? Guy who's been in the pen for the last 10 years, getting, not necessarily getting paid, but who's just been lifting weights for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you think I'm going to throw punches with him? Dude, come on, man. So Patrick, I don't know if you want to add to that a little bit. I see you smiling.
Hey, I'm gonna pause the input, but I'll leave this tip out there. The one thing that we're trying to instill when I do this training with folks is not becoming tool dependent. Understanding that you do have some options available to you, and there's also some psychological testing going on here too that I'll leave alone until next time, because I don't want to tip my hand, but. Yeah, I'll share some of the wide variety of answers that I've had from about 500 people that I've done this with.
Well, you're just a tease then, if that's what you're
doing.
I really want to answer this question real quick, if that's okay, actually.
Yeah, all right. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first takeaway I'm going to have, so if we're going to go from the perspective of a human weapon system, since that's kind of what brought this on, you already have a huge advantage because he's crashing into the place. So I'm going to assume he's coming in through a window or a point of entry that's not the most beneficial to him. The last thing that guy's probably going to imagine is some soaped up guy coming out balls with hanging out and going, hey, buddy, what's up? So violence of action is like your best friend. I would say grab your genitals, start stroking yourself and go, hey, sweetheart, and run right at him. And you probably got a pretty decent chance. So.
Welcome to the shit show.
I have not heard that answer before.
And just like that, boys and girls, the whole podcast went off the rails.
And
Blake took us down into, I'm grabbing my nutsack and I'm running at him.
Look, I'm just here to say, to your point, Blake, look, you say, welcome to the shit show. And then you look at him deep in the eyes and you're like, you're stuck in here with me now.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, so, I mean, this is too much information, dude. I sleep naked. All right. Yeah. If I'm getting out of bed, I'm grabbing my shotgun, throwing boots on, putting the carrier on, and I'm coming out, and you're going to see my balls, but it's the last thing you're going to friggin' see. And there is psychological impact to something like that.
Hold on. Is that the definition? Hey, Mark, I got a question. Is that the actual definition?
Patrick, no, I agree with you. Hang on a second. This was fun and it's humorous, but there is a serious side to what Blake just said, and I don't know if that's where you're going to go. But Patrick, go ahead and take it.
Well, I was going to ask number one: is that the actual definition of balls to the wall?
100%.
I thought we were going to get serious here.
Yeah, but so again, so what I do in this scenario is I intentionally take away the tools, weapons, whatever you want to call them, away from you. And the human weapon system is understanding that your body has a lot of inherent capabilities in it. It's just that we get in our heads thinking that we need this magic talisman that's going to save us. You, again, going back to kind of the Redbeard's, Rambo quote, like, yeah, the mind is the most important weapon. And then following that, going from like the contact point I talked about, you've got to have that ability to bring forth bodily violence on somebody, to create time, space, and availability. And that's something we can talk about later. And that availability could be access to, a tool or a weapon.
Yes.
Well, and so on a serious note, that's where I was kind of going, Patrick, is like when I'm hearing this, without the balls to the walls, that's kind of making me think of Udo Dirkschneider from Accept. You got your balls to the, but putting that aside, is like, again, I've got stuff staged throughout my house, and to this hypothetical scenario, if it's a guy who's 6'8" and he's like Hulk Hogan, like, I'm not going fist to that guy. But to your point, Patrick, and let's save that for later, but I'm not going to go fist, because there's other things I'm going to probably use to my advantage, or try to, and then if I can buy a little bit of time, as you said, time, space, these things equal opportunity. The more distance I have between me and somebody else, that equals time, or some other type of thing. Even here in the kitchen, throw some flour out in the air. Even if it doesn't get in that guy's face, it's in the air. It might buy me 1 second. And you've heard me say this before. A second is a long fucking time. So that maybe gets me, access to another weapon, or the spear, or a katana, or whatever it is that I have, or a handgun or a shotgun. So, Paul.
Yes.
Hang on,
I wanted to raise my hand. So one thing that I'm
sure. Do you want to
all,
respond to that directly, or do you want to give it in a different direction?
We're all aware of this. What we haven't mentioned yet are the natural weapons. Yeah, I have something to defend myself if I'm in the shower. That's my most vulnerable time. Dogs. I have trained dogs. They're going to let me know long before anybody gets in here. And if they do, they're trained enough to at least fend them off while I need to get ready. I'm sorry if you're a cat person, but dogs are better for self-defense. That's
in life in general, man, we're symbiotic with dogs. They are one of our greatest tools.
Well, and and Blake, I know you know this, because I love your dogs, and and you
got
and
one
your,
right here that's bugging the hell out of me too.
But any one of those dogs in your house are either going to give you an early warning, or they're going to buy you, to Paul's point, they're going to buy you that precious couple seconds. And it would be devastating to lose that animal that really you love just as much as a family member.
Well, they are a family member.
Yeah. But to Paul's point, that's better than your wife dying, or your roommate dying, or your son or your daughter dying. I hate to say it that way. And
but they may alert you before they get in.
Yeah.
My dogs are fully aware of the surroundings outside the house. They don't have to be sacrificed. I'm not saying that in any way.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, no, they give me the heads up, and then I'm ready, and I protect them, because they're my alarm.
Well, to that point, let's hit on this one next time, because Paul, like, I'm pretty good on this, but this is more your realm. But there's some really poor man's electronic surveillance, electronic early warning devices. And Redbeard, you may remember this from the original bunker. I had those things all over the place on the property, inside and way outside of the house. I knew if somebody was driving down my driveway when they were still 100 yards away, and it didn't cost me millions of dollars to do. So there's some other things. So maybe we bring this up next time. And Patrick, we got to do this because, again, I don't think we did justice to some of the things that I know you want to talk about tonight. And I think that's equally as important. And Redbeard, you and I talked about this too. Like, you're going to carry an edged weapon. Well, do you even know what you're doing with it? X, Y, and Z, and blah, blah, blah. Yep. So on that note, how about I shut the F up for once, and let's start right below me with Paul. Let's go to Patrick, and then to Blake, and then we'll end it with Redbeard. We'll just go counterclockwise, and we'll end it with Redbeard for final comments and the outro. So, Paul, and again, guys, take your time. I know you guys got to bounce, but take whatever time you think necessary. Just don't make it 30 minutes. We're going to wrap this up here, I guess.
Yep.
No, so I think that I made my point to transition to the next episode or podcast, whatever we want to call it. Other than that, the only thing I didn't address was the Plus P ammo, and
Oh,
I was
let's talk
fooled.
about
I have it. It's worthless.
Yep,
it,
100%.
it will hurt you. So don't go Plus P. And that was great advice.
Yeah.
You didn't see it.
Blake.
Yeah, I had you full camera, but Blake was giving you 2 huge thumbs
Yeah.
up on that one.
Plus P
Yeah.
is garbage, man. Just
It's
don't even-
garbage.
Unless you're
I'll
like
for
a
it.
majors shooter, like your competition for it, there is no point for that crap.
Nope.
Yep.
No.
All right, Paul. So Plus P, you've got a vote of solidarity from Blake. Yeah, it's a big thumbs down. What else you got for us, sir?
I would say that I look forward to talking, with Patrick's, because I think a lot of what Patrick's is leading into the next episode is some of the technology stuff that comes into play with me. And I know, I mentioned swatting, and that seems like the typical thing, but trust me, there's a lot of other things that we can do with the guns and things. And I'm just looking forward to the next episode. I don't want to give anything else away.
All right. Well, and also the home surveillance and the home security. I mean,
cameras and all that stuff. We're going to talk about cameras and whether you have internet access, and if you lose internet access, do you lose your cameras? Those type of things, I think, will be good.
All right, Patrick, coming over to you, sir. Your full
All right,
screen.
great. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it. I'll leave it with this. I'll just say that, I think folks are getting way too dependent on technology, from just being addicted to staring at screens and that type of thing. We're losing our humanity. But the one thing that we can't lose touch with is ourselves. When all you do is look at other people and in their best light and that type of thing, you lose sight of what you are and what you're capable of. When I kind of like primed the human weapon system topic for next time, you're far more capable, and the human body is a lot more resilient than you might think, right? It's not Hollywood. It's not the movies. I mean, I've seen gangbangers who've been shot like 18 times and literally walk out of the hospital, in a day or two. And they're back out on the street like the following weekend. So, I mean, if that doesn't tell you, what the body's capable of, and I'm sure on the battlefield, Mark's seen some people that have been, hit multiple times, and guess what? They walked away from it. So it's amazing what we're capable of, and we cannot focus just on our own limitations. We've got to build capacity. Yes. The best way to do this is just like not be paranoid. Whatever you're going to do in this realm of self-defense, home defense, that type of thing, individual responsibility, take it serious and be good at it. Why not, right? Because this is not something you want to be half-ass on. And if you were to ask yourself, hey, would I want this person coming to my aid? You should have a pretty confident feel for that. Being former law enforcement, I look at a lot of officers, and hey, man, there's a handful of guys I'd be calling them first, right? Because I know that they train, I know that they're in shape, I know that they've got the experience and the willingness to do that. But there is also, that segment of, what is referred to as the thick blue line, because maybe they're not as physically capable that, show up, and it's like, hey, man, I don't know if I want that guy going in, because he might be more of a liability than an asset. So, anyway, but everybody, if you take care of your mind and you take care of your health, you're already, head and shoulders above most of the population. So I'll leave it at that. And that's a great starting point for anybody.
Yeah. Well, so let's remember that again. So you and Paul have already brought up 2 great points for the next time. And I'm just going to add to kind of what both of you just said. And this is my out, and then we'll come to Blake and we'll finish with Redbeard. But my out is, I remember when I first left the agency, and I'm kind of coming back, and I'm meeting friends again that I haven't seen in 20, 30 years. And after a few years of, I was the crazy guy. And then it was like, then it was like, oh, if there's a zombie apocalypse, we're just going to come to Mark's place. I'm like, no, you're not. Everybody would be like, what? No, you're not. You're not bringing anything to the table. You haven't prepared mentally, physically. So I'm just bringing that to your point, Patrick. And I'm not throwing them under the bus.
Right.
But now I will just say this now, fast forward, 6 years later, and more people are actually taking active measures. So I like what you just said, Patrick. And I think, again, I didn't mean this to, there's a funny joke there, but I don't mean it to throw them under the bus. I think people are starting to wake up and realizing that there's shit that you need to start preparing for and you need to start taking seriously. Yes. And I think the next time we're going to get into another aspect of that. And I think Paul and Patrick are going to lead us in that direction. Yeah. Blake, with your just incredibly handsome beard, what are your final comments, sir?
So I would actually say, I next time, if I'm able to be back for it, because it's been a lot of fun, I'd really like to focus more on the things, because, we've talked a lot about how to defend yourself and what the implements you're going to use to defend yourself are, at least in this modern day and age. But what we haven't talked about is, it's kind of like Paul was talking about with security system, being able to get your eyes out there and how can we extend our field of view, or, what do we do for nutrition? How do we prepare food for people? How do we store food? What do we do in the case of, I can't go to the grocery store anymore? Do we grow it on property? Do we hunt more? Do we forage more? And what does that look like? And really that to me is more important once you've kind of figured out how to be at least an asset to defending your family. I think then feeding them is, well, you ain't got no family if they ain't got no calories. So I think that's a really big thing. And I think, when grocery bag and a half costs $90, it's prudent that we all start our own bee gardens. So,
Hey, Redbeard, before we come over to you and just turn it to everybody else, and also again the audience, anybody who's watching or listening, leave a comment. I think we're gonna, Redbeard, I'm just making this up right now. I think we do one more of this series in the next decade, but then I think somewhere in the next decade, if for whomever can join us again, I think we do this as a live feed and we do this as a Q&A type of thing. So in other words, here's 3 episodes. Here's the building blocks. Now we do it. This is like, okay, what do you guys think? And whoever wants to join us, they're like, hey, Blake, what do you mean by that? Like you should be able to feed your family. Then you can talk about chickens, or you can, or horticulture, or you can talk about hydroponics, or Patrick, you can talk about like, here's the shit that you can do in your own garage, and getting yourself ready for, that human weapon system. Paul, you can sit and talk, well, here's the things that, see where I'm kind of going with that, guys. I think that might not be a bad idea, but we can talk offline about that, tonight or next time. But for anybody who's watching, leave a comment. Tell us what you think. So I'm here to tell you right now, I know we're going to do a part 3. It'll be in our next decade. So our next video is going to be our mashup, where Redbeard and I just review the last 10 episodes to see, hey, were we stupid? Were we right? What's happened since then? So that's the next episode that we'll do. We are going to probably do an episode, just to let everybody know. I think we're going to do, we started off doing 2 episodes a week. We're going to probably do an episode Tuesday of next week. So that would be the 17th or 18th. I'm sorry, 13th, 14th, 15th, 17th. That'll be the 17th of October. We're going to probably do an episode about the whole horrible situation in Israel. And we're just kind of letting that play out and giving it some time. We're going to probably do one on Tuesday. We've got a video from us on the range that I'm also going to probably release on Tuesday, just talking about some shotgun, because we're doing guns and things. But I think, guys, if we can make it happen, we do this again. We do part 3. We talk a lot more about the things, and then we might even do a part 4, which is a live feed, a live stream, and we do a Q&A and let people. There might be people want to ask, Patrick about, oh, tell me more about that self-defense system that you study, or Blake, tell me more about, a 300 blackout or something. I don't know. We just let it go and take its own natural course. So before we turn it over to Redbeard for his final comments and the outro, what do you guys think about that? Does that make a little bit sense? Or is that kind of stupid? I got a thumbs up from Blake. Paul's got a thumbs up. Oh, there it is, boys. All right. Then, so for everybody watching, tell us in the comments if that makes sense to you and if that's what you want to see. That's it for me. Redbeard, why don't you give us your final comments and your outro, sir?
So I'm just going to kind of go off of a couple things, I guess. Basically, there's a lot to be said about, that human weapon system, if you will. And where I'm just going to point people is like, look, if you really want to start to tap into kind of that particular realm, get into some type of combat sport. Whether it's you're taking a weekend karate class or whether you're taking jujitsu or whatever, like get into the realm to where you start to have that force on force at some point, because it's one of the most eye-opening things and you'll ever learn about yourself and what your capabilities are. And more importantly, you know, it'll help you deal with stresses that you never knew that you've had. If you've never been punched in the face before, it's an eye-opening situation. If you've never been thrown around by a guy that's half your weight or a gal that's half your weight, in like a jujitsu setting before, you know, for both men and women, like it's an eye-opening situation. Being in a position to where you're not guaranteed to have the upper hand all the time is a great way to help you learn how to adapt to a potential environment, and certain stressors that you wouldn't otherwise deal with. Jiu-jitsu for me was a fantastic eye-opener. And then I have a background in different stand-up types of martial arts. And it's just something that I feel like if you're really serious about it and you want to learn more about who you are as a person, which I think is highly important, getting involved in something like that in a place that really has their shit together is incredibly important. And I don't know if the rest of the guys would agree with that, but that's my personal point of view on that. Something we never got an opportunity to talk about, but I feel is equally important is if you're going to have tools, if you're going to have something to use to the employment of your defense or whatever the case might be, you have got to understand how to maintenance these things. It's something that I feel is overlooked by a lot of people. Hence why, like, I feel like a lot of gunsmiths will probably tell you, like, oh yeah, like I have guns that I clean on a pretty regular basis because they don't want to do it. Well, I'm here to tell you it's all good and fine to be able to fire your weapon system or whatever the case is. But if you're or knives or whatever, like if you don't have a relationship with the system that you're using, that you're depending your life on, that you're going to employ, then you're well behind the curve there. And again, like the human weapon system, you could use a rock, use your environment to your advantage. But I'm just saying, if you're going to have a tool that you're going to employ, learn how to maintenance it, understand its quirks, and learn about it so you can use it the most efficient way possible. I'm just going to kind of leave it on that. They're just 2 points that I felt were kind of important. And on that, if you guys are good with that, unless you have something to say, I can take us out.
Gentlemen, anybody want to add anything to Redbeard's outro?
I just want to say that I think it's crucial to get those capable of doing martial arts and doing those type of trainings, and those that aren't capable, just concentrate on fitness and do the best you can to keep yourself in shape. And then you have to concentrate on using the tools because you can't use your body. Right. So again, I agree 100% with what Redbeard said, and I'll leave it at that.
On a personal note, I'll agree with everything Paul just said, because so my body is not as anywhere near what is. So I just had that eye-opening experience with Redbeard where it's like, I'm usually here. And I was like, here, like, okay, whatever. Yep. That's not a look at me, I'm a cool guy. Like, dude, my skill set had deteriorated. So to Paul's point, it's like, dude, if you can't be here, if you're not being hands, and if you're going to be relying on tools, then you got to be a master of those tools. And I don't know if that fits into Patrick, and maybe we'll just let him kind of come back to that, the human weapon system. I mean, I guess my interpretation of that is just like, yeah, it's both physical and it's all about hell. Here, this big ass, Yeti thing. That's part of my human weapon system as far as I'm concerned. Because if I hit you with this thing, dude, I'd do some damage. And honestly, now that I just thought about it, it's got a nice little handle. I mean, like smack. That probably and at least stun you enough to give me a chance to get to a real weapon. So Patrick, was that stupid, or does that fit in? I see you kind of smirking a little bit.
It's so I'm going to focus next time, I think, on our physical capabilities, and limitations. Everybody's got them. And it's
Yep.
just, and when it comes to any of this stuff, like perishability is a big thing, right? So I used to be a tactical spoiled brat like you, Mark. I had the government feeding me, and I had this magical Connex box that had all this ammo that just kept getting refilled. And I had these professional instructors that were just, like running us through every day. But everybody doesn't do this. That's just not realistic. So obviously that skill set's deteriorated since then. I'm just doing the best I can to maintain it. And I think the best thing that we can all do is just find the happy medium to maintain whatever capability you've got, whether it's firearms or physical capabilities, and just do it in a comfortable way. Because if you get too hardcore with it, you're not going to maintain it, and it's just going to fall off. It's going to become something that you don't enjoy anymore. Find a way to make it enjoyable. That way, the likelihood of you continuing it and maintaining it is much higher. So I'll leave it at that.
Before I come over to Blake for final comments on that, Patrick, you just made me think of diets. Like you get all these like crazy ass diets, but they're unrealistic, right? The best diet out there is like a diet that's, to what you just said, that's more realistic. I can do this a couple days a week. I can do this a couple days a week. It's sustainable. If your program, whatever it is, if it's unsustainable, well, then that's what it is. It's unsustainable. If it's unrealistic, well, then you're never going to accomplish your goals because it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Blake, anything to add?
Not really, man. I don't want to take away from the next one. I think we've hit it all pretty good. I'm just ready to hear Redbeard serenade us away. So,
well, on that note, Blake,
there it is. The serenade begins.
Yeah. So, well, on that note, hey, I just want to say thank you guys for taking the time out of your lives to come on and deal with Mark and I. I know we can be kind of unruly at times, subpar performances on our behalf, but you guys really make it though. So no, seriously, we really appreciate you guys. Thank you for your insight, your input, because you all have something unique that you can provide this. And we really do appreciate it. I've said this before, but like Mark and I started this, but it's really every guest that we have on, especially you guys who've been coming back a lot. You guys really make this what it is. And we don't take that lightly, we really do appreciate it. So on that note,
unfortunately, we don't have gifts for all of our guests. Were flown by United Airlines. United Airlines, if you want to chime in and start flying people, we'll sponsor you. Be a sponsor.
Yeah. So and I have to just quickly shout out before I get into my wrap up. Thank you to everybody who takes the time to watch this. I know we're kind of autistic at times, or at least I am. I'm very self-aware. I can go on honest rants, but look, we're all human, we're all fallible, but thank you very much for dealing with us and listening to what we have to say. And hopefully, as the goal is, you guys have gotten something out of this. So on that note, Mark, I'm going to bring us out. So look, everybody, the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there's good people that are willing to support and defend it. And as Mark always says, you are the resistance. So you guys play a big part into this. And on that note, that's all I got for you, Mark. So
all right,
everybody take care.
Thank you for everybody being here. Thank you for watching or listening. Yes. And I guess we'll probably see you guys next Tuesday. And we're going to talk a little bit about this whole fucking madness going on in the Middle East. So a special edition next Tuesday. Just stay tuned. Anything else, Redbeard?
That's all I got, man.
All right, everybody. God bless. We'll see you later.
Cheers.
Be good, everyone.